Good morning. Is my mic working?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, President Reed, we're live.
The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Present.
Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Evans.
Present.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Present.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
Present.
Alderman Coder.
Here.
Alderwoman Rice.
Present.
Alderman Gunther.
Here.
Alderman Vollmer.
Present.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Grass.
Here.
Alderwoman Murphy.
Present.
Alderwoman Howard.
Present.
Alderwoman Green.
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Rhodey.
Rhodey's present.
Thank you. Alderman Todd.
Present.
Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Vaquero.
Present.
Alderman Narayan.
Here.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Present.
President Reed.
Here.
Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Martin.
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Davis.
Present.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Cone. 24 present.
A quorum being present, we are just so blessed and lucky today to have John, our very own John Watson Jr. here today to lead us in prayer from Maple Temple. John Watson, floor is yours.
God bless each and every one of you. We have not ceased to pray for you all, and we thank God for you all. With that in mind, we ask those that will join us to lift your heart and your mind toward heaven as we pray this morning. As we quote from the Holy Scriptures, "The Lord is the light of my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" Gracious God, Heavenly Father, it was the light of your love that illuminated our path in the darkest of time. That allowed us to see clearer and removed our fears. It was the strength of your spirit that allowed us to stand against our odds and not be afraid. On today, releasing this community and nation again, those enabling graces that flow from you that will allow our minds to remain clear and our hearts to be strong as we as a people vote on local and national leadership that will make decisions that impact our lives for now and in the future. Into your arms we commit ourselves, our families, our community, our nation. Amen. God bless.
Amen. Thank you. Let's give Pastor John Watson Jr. a big round of applause and thank you for leading us today in prayer. Pastor Watson, we have missed you. I've done my best to lead us in prayer over the time that we weren't able to have you here, but was not a good substitute. So we invite you back anytime you can make it. Thank you, Pastor
All
Watson.
right, we'll be more consistent on the prayer. We have a schedule now, and so we will be here.
Oh, thank you so much. We will dispense with line item 3, introduction of honored guests. Alderman from the 23rd.
As always, I like to have my good friend Greg Meyer as my honored guest.
Welcome, Greg Meyer. We appreciate having you here. Any further introductions? Alderwoman
Yeah.
from the 4th.
Yes, I'd like to introduce my special guest. Her name is Julia N. Allen.
Julian Allen.
And I'd like to introduce her today.
All right, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Allen. Any further introductions? Alderman from the 10th, like to wrap us up?
All right, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Today, October 30th, this is National Candy Corn Day, the food you either love or hate. But more importantly, in 1974, a movie premiere that helped shape the Alderman from the 23rd's life, his favorite piece of cinema, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Thank you.
I love that movie. That's the best.
Approval of the minutes.
Approval of the minutes, Friday, October 23rd, 2020.
Alderman from the 22nd, you're recognized on approval of the minutes.
Morning, Mr. President, members of the board. I move for approval of the minutes dated October 23rd, 2020.
Second.
Alderman from 22nd, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th and the Alderman from the 10th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in A, B, and C of the agenda and has been placed in the Alderman's mailboxes. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for the appointment to the Bevo Community Improvement District. The appointment of Mr. Samir Sajid, who's a business owner whose term will expire September 16th, 2021. The reappointment of Mr. Mark Daly, a property owner within the district whose term will expire September 16th, 2021. The appointment of Mr. Anthony Zanti, serving as a business and property owner to an unexpired term ending September 16th, 2022. The reappointment of Mr. David Ottinger, a property owner and resident in the district whose term will expire September 16th, 2022. The reappointment of Ms. Jody Timbrook, a property owner and business owner within the district whose term will expire September 16th, 2022. The reappointment of Mr. Zoran Panjovic, a business owner within the district whose term will expire September 16th, 2022. The reappointment of Mr. Sadiq Hukik, a property and business owner within the district whose term will expire September 16th, 2023. I respect your request for the approval of the appointment. Sincerely, Lyda Cruzen, Mayor.
Alderman from the 14th, you recognized the mayor's appointment to the Bevo Community Improvement District.
Yes, Mr. President and esteemed colleagues, I would like to put these people before the board and for their approval to the Bevo Community Improvement District.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderman from the 13th, that we approve the mayor's appointments to the Bevo Community Improvement District. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off or resolutions off of any of our informal accounts? Alderman from the 8th, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move Board Bill 95 to the regular perfection calendar, please.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Place Board Bill 95 at the end of the regular perfection calendar. Would anyone like to take any further bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? We will dispense further with the line items 8 through 10. First reading of board bills.
Board Bill 154, sponsored by Alderwoman Hubbard, an ordinance prohibiting the City of St. Louis Building Commissioner from approving or otherwise allowing the issuance of building permits for residential and commercial construction and demolition permits for any properties located within the boundaries of the area defined herein as the Fifth Ward Building Permit Moratorium District for a period of 1 year and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 155, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, an ordinance establishing a maximum posted speed limit of 20 miles per hour for all the traffic traveling upon sections of the roadways in areas zoned A, single-family residential district, B, two-family residential dwelling district, C, multiple family residential dwelling district, D, multiple family residential dwelling district, and E, multiple family dwelling district that are within the area defined herein as a third ward residential speed limit district. That is the extent of first reading of board bills.
Reference to committee.
To the Public Safety Committee, Board Bill 154. To the Streets Committee, Board Bill 155. That is the extent of reference to committee.
Second reading.
The following board bills were reported out of, the following board bill was reported out of the Coronavirus Special Committee. Board Bill 119, sponsored by Alderman Boyd, President Reed, and the following alderpersons: Davis, Vaccaro, Hubbard, Ingracia, Murphy, Coder, Oldenburg, Middlebrook, and Clark Hubbard. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment wherein the Board of Aldermen authorizes the receipt of and appropriates the funds awarded under the Missouri Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development Dislocated Workers National Emergency WIO grant relating to the COVID-19 pandemic and containing an emergency clause. The following board bills were reported out of Ways and Means with a due pass recommendation. Board Bill 98, sponsored by Collins Muhammad, an ordinance establishing the O'Fallon Penrose Special Business District pursuant to section 7190 through 71808 of the revised statutes of Missouri, setting its boundaries, tax rate, initial rate of levy subject to the approval of qualified voters, binding authority, and uses of which tax revenue may be put, creating a board of commissioners and containing the severability, effectiveness, and emergency clauses. Board Bill 151, sponsored by Alderman Oldenburg, Alderman Collins Muhammad, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderwoman Murphy, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderman Balmer, and Alderwoman Howard, an ordinance submitting to the qualified voters of the City of St. Louis pursuant to section 92.115 of revised statutes of Missouri, the question of whether to continue the earnings tax imposed on the City of St. Louis for a period of 5 years, providing for an election and manner of voting, providing that if such question shall receive the votes of a majority of the voters voting thereon, that such earning tax shall continue, and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. The following board bill was reported out of Public Utilities with a due pass recommendation. Board Bill 41, sponsored by Alderman Coder and Alderwoman Ingracia. An ordinance promoting the use of energy efficient heat through the connection to the downtown steam distribution system, promoting the continual use of the downtown steam distribution system for any development project occurring in downtown St. Louis, seeking municipal financial incentives, prohibiting the Clean Energy Development Board of the City of St. Louis from approving financing for any project that will result in commercial building disconnecting from or no longer using the downtown steam distribution system for heat containing a severability clause. The following board bill was reported out of Health and Human Services with a due pass recommendation. Board Bill 153, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance authorizing and directing the acting director of the City of St. Louis Department of Health to accept a grant from the Department of Health and Human Services Centers for Disease Control and Prevention as a cooperative agreement known as the Community-Based Approaches to Reducing Sexually Transmitted Diseases grant to fund a multi-jurisdictional, cross-sector, community-centered approach to address policies and practice that impact disproportionately the STI HIV burden on young Black men upon approval of the Board of Estimate and Apportionment and to expend funds by entering into contracts or otherwise to grant purposes and contain an emergency clause. That is the extent of second reading report of standing committees.
Madam Clerk, I may have missed it, but did you read Board Bill 36? It may have been on, was that an early misprint? Alderwoman from the first?
It wasn't reported out of committee.
Okay. That's
We kept
what's
it.
going on. Okay. So Board Bill
Okay.
36 is still in committee.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Alderwoman.
But while I have the floor, I still want to take those bills off of perfection consent calendar.
Now is the time to do it because that's the very next thing. All right, which bills?
Correct. 135, 143,
135,
143, and 144 and 145.
44 and 145. Madam Clerk,
That is correct.
make note of that. Place Board Bills 135, 143, 144, and 145 at the end of the regular perfection calendar.
Mr. President,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Alderman from the 24th Ward, you've had your hand up. Yeah.
could we also place Board Bill 141 on? Can we take it off the consent calendar?
Yes. Madam Clerk, please place Board Bill 141 on the regular perfection calendar also. Any further discussion? So that's Board Bills 135, 141, 143, 144, and 145 from the perfection consent calendar to the regular perfection calendar.
Okay, 143 was already on the regular perfection calendar.
Okay. Board Bills for perfection consent.
Okay. Board Bill 85, sponsored by Alderwoman Middlebrook, an ordinance amending the redevelopment plan for North Broadway, Cary, Harris Avenue redevelopment area. Board Bill 106, sponsored by Alderman Coder, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan dated July 28, 2020 for the 801 through 805 and 813 North 2nd Street area. Board Bill 107, sponsored by Alderman Coder, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan dated July 28, 2020 for the 505 Washington Avenue area. Board Bill 129, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance amending the redevelopment plan for 300 South Broadway redevelopment area, approved by ordinance 70717 dated February the 27th, 2018. Board Bill 138, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing a first amendment to the Ground Transportation Policy Ordinance 69382, approved February the 6th, 2013, deleting section 64A of Ordinance 69382 and substituting a new section, 684, increasing the monthly permit fees for off-airport rental car operators beginning April 1st, 2021, containing a severability clause and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 139, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller of the City of St. Louis to enter into and execute on behalf of the city 7 second amendments to the on-airport passenger vehicle rental concession agreement at St. Louis Lambert International Airport between the city and the following concessionaires: Hertz Corporation, Avis Rent-A-Car, Enterprise Leasing, doing business as National Rent-A-Car, Enterprise Leasing, doing business as Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Budget Rent-A-Car, doing business as Budget Rent-A-Car, Enterprise Leasing, doing business as Alamo Rent-A-Car, C&J Rent-A-Car, doing business as Thrifty Car Rental, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 140, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller of the City of St. Louis to enter into and execute on behalf of the city the third amendment to the operating agreement for management and operation of parking facility services AL 267 between the city and ABM Aviation Inc., amending the operating agreement for management and operation of parking facility services AL 267 containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 118, sponsored by Alderwoman Murphy, President Reed, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Collins Muhammad, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Middlebrook, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment wherein the Board of Aldermen authorizes the receipt of and appropriates funds awarded under the Community Development Block Grant Program relating to the COVID-19 pandemic and the need for temporary financial assistance for rental payments and contain an emergency clause. That is the extent of perfection consent calendar.
Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the perfection consent calendar.
Second.
Moved by the Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 143, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance to submit a 2021 annual action plan to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development as required to apply for funding under the Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership, Emergency Solutions Grant, and Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS entitlement programs, authorizing and directing the mayor and comptroller on behalf of the city of St. Louis to enter into and execute agreements with HUD for the receipt of 2021 CDBG, home, ESG, and HOPWA funds.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill 143.
Yes, Mr. President, I move for perfection of Board Bill 130.
143.
143, I'm sorry.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th. Alderman from the 17th, please proceed.
Mr. President, we just renew my motion. It's our annual block grant bill, and we've had the hearing on it this past week.
Okay, Alderwoman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I just wanted to make sure that I made something clear. That's why I asked for it to be removed from the consent calendar. If the Alderman from the 19th would yield.
The Alderwoman from the 19th?
Alderman from the, I'm sorry, the Alderman from the 17th. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, perfect. Alderman from the 17th will yield the question to the Alderwoman from the 1st.
Sure.
Alderwoman from the 1st, please proceed.
Alderman, this is our regular block grant bill, which and it does it in any way affect the St. Louis Housing Authority? Is there any money in here for the St. Louis Housing Authority that you know of?
I am not aware.
I couldn't find it.
I am not aware of any, Alderwoman, but the list of organizations that they fund is fairly extensive. So I don't want to emphatically say that.
Okay, well, the reason why I'm saying that is because I couldn't find it in here. And so I would have a conflict of interest if I voted for something for the Housing Authority. So I did not want to vote for something that there was a conflict of interest. So I didn't find it in here, and I thought that you might know, but I didn't see it. I read it. So I will take it if you don't know anything about it, and you've been doing it for several years, and I couldn't find it. Most likely it's not there. All right, thank you. I have no further.
Okay.
I have no further questions.
Okay,
thank you, Alderman.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 17th, you recognize to close.
I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill 143. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Board Bill 95, sponsored by Alderwoman Rice, Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Todd, Alderman Narayan, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderwoman Martin, Alderwoman Green, Alderman Gunther, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and Alderman Cone. An ordinance setting forth regulations for the use of surveillance technology by the City of St. Louis, requiring surveillance technology usage, rules, regulation, specific technologies and guidelines to be established and approved by the Board of Aldermen before any such surveillance technology may be used, and plans may be put into practice, and contain a severability clause and an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 8th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill number 95.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is
Alderwoman,
setting,
you have to make a motion before.
sorry, I'd like to move to perfect Board Bill 95.
Second.
Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Alderwoman from the 8th, please proceed.
Great, thank you so much. This board bill is a board bill that has been in front of the board 2 terms previously. It is designed to set up a structure for the regulation of surveillance technology in the city of St. Louis. It is not a ban on surveillance technology. It is not trying to tell entities what they can and cannot use. It is asking for transparency from the city government. It is asking for disclosure of what it is that we have and what it is that we are using, and what any discriminatory effects are being used. So part of this is financial fiscal accountability. We've spent millions of dollars on surveillance technology over the past several years, and we have rising crime rates. Where are the connections to this technology? Is this technology helping? Is this technology hurting? We're trying to get to the bottom of that, and that is what this bill does. It sets up a multi-step system. So within the first 120 days, the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency will be tasked with getting an advisory board together that would then promulgate a policy, a surveillance use or technology use policy for the city of St. Louis. That policy itself has to come before the public, has to be transparent, has to then come before the Public Safety Committee, and then to the full board. So that is the point at which we will weigh in on the substantive pieces of surveillance technology. So this bill is really just trying to get us to that next step of where we get to weigh in on what we want the surveillance technology policy to be for the city of St. Louis. After that point, once that is finally approved by the Board of Aldermen, then sets forward the next step to where city entities will be responsible for submitting a plan, a technology use plan, to the Board of Aldermen. They have 180 days after the policy is created to then report to both the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency, the Advisory Board, and then to the Public Safety Committee. At that point, we're hoping to understand what it is that we have, how it's being used, what we're watching, and what any effects of the technology are. The next step after that is, if new technology wants to be used, new technology has to be approved by the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency and then the Public Safety Committee of the Board of Aldermen. It is not, adding a new camera to the real-time crime center would not be a new technology that needs to be evaluated first. But the persistent surveillance system, if we are going to be flying Cessnas over the city, that would be something that would be a new technology that we haven't used. If we're instituting facial recognition technology and we don't already have that in place, that is a new technology that would have to come in front of the board before we approve. And the whole idea around this is so that we, as elected representatives of the people and the people themselves, have the opportunity to weigh in on what technology is out there, is used to watch us, is used to surveil us, and how that data is being used on the back end as well, how long it's being stored, et cetera. So in conversations over this summer and this fall, there were some concerns about the burden on special taxing districts. Because they are normally citizen run, they don't always have employees. Some of those folks have cameras that they own and maintain themselves. So I would like to put in front of us amendment number 1 to Board Bill 95.
Amendment number 1. Is amendment number 1 on the drive for everybody
Yes.
to have access?
Yes, it's been on the drive since last night.
Okay, excellent. Please make the motion for amendment number 1.
I would like,
But also read it so we have it. So,
sure, absolutely.
read it. in
I would
the
like
record.
to move to adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 95.
All right, which is.
Second.
You have to
Sorry, I was waiting
state,
for
you
a
have to
second
state it
before I
for
continued.
people who are watching the meeting that
Absolutely.
don't have access to that our drive. They need to understand what.
Yes,
amendment
absolutely. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I had a second on that first. So this board bill, to amend said board bill, page 1, line 17 to page 1, line 17 as follows. Following the words "within the city of St. Louis," insert the following. For the purposes of this ordinance, a special tax district shall not be considered a city entity. However, any city entity that wishes to systematically share or otherwise exchange surveillance technology or surveillance data with or from a special tax district shall request approval to do so in accordance with section 4A2 of this ordinance. So this is removing the burden from the special taxing district and putting that back on the city entity.
Hold on for a second. So that was all part of the motion. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th. I entertain a second on that motion.
Second. I second.
Seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st and the Alderwoman from the 6th. So please proceed, Alderwoman.
Thank you. So the goal here is to move the burden, to shift the burden away from the special taxing districts to the city entities that are using the technology, that are systematically using the technology. There was some confusion when we got started about, we have some special taxing districts that purchase cameras that then loop directly into the real-time crime center. Some donate them to the police department for police use. Those then fall under police department supervision, and therefore under city entity, the police department will be reporting on their use of that technology. If a special taxing district purchases the camera and they send the footage to the police department when a crime happens, that does not fall under systematic use. Systematic use is regular access from a city entity to use that data. So this is just trying to clarify that we are shifting the burden to the city entity that is using the data to report on it, to include it in its plan, and to include data about.
Okay. Alderwoman from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. If the Alderwoman from the 8th would yield, I'd appreciate it.
Alderwoman from the 8th will yield
questions.
the question to the Alderwoman from the 5th.
Sure.
Alderwoman from the 5th, please proceed.
Thank you. I don't know if it's just me, but I know, like you said, that this bill has came up several times before, and we've been kind of holding it, but it seems like that some significant changes have been made. I do know that I'll still stand by the premise that my community is definitely not enraged about us having some type of program that delves deep into the weeds on our surveillance. We're just so blessed and grateful to have the cameras, and I do have some questions about how they are moving. But is this something, because it seems like it's really in depth now, and I know it's been some time, we've all endured a lot. Is this something that you will be willing to send back to committee so that we can give, different opinions on it, just to see how we could move forward and appease all of the interests that are out there? Because like I said, to me, it's kind of, I feel kind of bombarded by it this weekend. I haven't, wrapped my head totally around it. And I just would like more information so I can make a better informed vote on it. Is that something that you would be willing to do, just so we can get clarification on really what's going on?
I appreciate the concern. At this point, I am not willing to send it back to committee because there have been multiple committee hearings over multiple years on this, and it has not substantively changed since the last time the Public Safety Committee heard from the Public Safety Director on the bill. And I really think that the time for in-depth scrutiny of the policy will be when the policy itself comes back through the Public Safety Committee. That's when the real nitty gritty of what we're looking for, what we expect out of our city entities and surveillance data will come through.
Okay. Well, can you briefly explain the amendment again?
Sure. So the amendment removes the burden on the special taxing districts that may have their own surveillance technology. So so for example, South Grand Business District has a couple of cameras that they've put up that they've purchased with the special tax district money. So tax dollars. And previously we had included special taxing districts as city entities because of the tax dollars that were used. But what happened on South Grand is that they purchased the cameras and then they donated them to the police department. So they aren't actually under the control of the special taxing district. So who is using them is the police department, and that's who we want to report back on it. So we're trying to shift the burden away from that taxing district and back to the police department who is using the data. Does that make sense, or do you have further questions on that?
Yeah, it does make sense. But like I know in my neighborhood, we have cameras and we share that information. I guess when you get to the different taxing districts and stuff like that, that's where it gets kind of gray for me. And we definitely wouldn't want to discourage our community partners from buying cameras and putting them online with the Real-Time Crime Center. So I just would prefer to get more information about it. If I don't and we rush this through today, I know I'm definitely going to be a no vote, because I know my constituents, this is not an issue for them, but somewhere, and we have all the crimes in our neighborhoods in North St. Louis, but our constituents we welcome the cameras, we welcome the surveillance. And I get it that you are concerned about the process and what's done with the data, but in some of the most crime-ridden neighborhoods in North St. Louis, this is not an issue for them. So if we can't go back and, just get some more clarification on how we move forward to address some of these concerns, then you can definitely count me as a no vote. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I shared some of the same concerns as the Alderwoman from the 5th when this bill came up previously, and luckily over the summer was able to take some time and dig into this. And the Alderwoman from the 8th helped convene various stakeholders to work on the bill, and that is how we arrived at this amendment, which I do support, because I do agree a lot of these, whether they're neighborhood groups or these taxing districts specifically, are for the most part directed and managed by volunteer citizens, and so the requirements that we have for the police department, it does seem, should be different than what we have for these neighborhood groups. And so I support this amendment because it does keep the emphasis and the priority on transparency, but shifts the burden of that work to an agency that has the staff and the capacity in order to do that. So, I don't believe that this amendment is going to limit those neighborhood groups or those taxing districts from being able to use the technology they need to keep their communities safe, but that this bill does look at the bigger picture in terms of what's going on with surveillance in our city. And so for those reasons, I support this, and I applaud the Alderwoman from the 8th for taking those concerns seriously and making sure that there was an opportunity for input and for bringing forth this amendment. Thank you.
All right, Alderman from the 23rd.
I believe it should go back to committee myself, because the changes are just a lot to have to think about. I do know that the public safety director feels that he would like to have had more input. If it's appropriate at this time, I'd like to make a motion that we send it back to committee for hearings.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd, seconded by the Alderman from the
Point of order, Mr. President.
Second. Yes, please state your point of order.
There's a motion on the table already.
I know a motion to refer is always in order. So it's always in order. A motion to refer is always in order. So now the motion that's before us is a motion to refer Board Bill number 95 back to committee. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
I believe I would like to see this go back to committee because, for one, I appreciate that the Alderwoman from the 8th sent us these amendments last night, but in my folder this morning, I only have one. And I think they deserve careful consideration. This is a very important bill that we're considering here. And I think we have not had our technology people involved in this. And I think we need to have them on board with this and make sure that what we're doing is in compliance and they are able to comply with what we're asking here. So I would, I'm in favor of sending it back to the Public Safety Committee.
Right, thank
That's
you.
all. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Alderwoman from the 1st.
I read through all the amendments. They are amendments that are trying to address some of the concerns that people have had over the years. I don't see any of them that does great change except for to address the concerns people said. They had a concern about the entities, the special tax district. So she went back and she worked on that. I do understand people saying, well, they want to make sure that they're not harmed, but in fact, this improves the original bill, as does the continuing amendments. I don't know if other people had time to read them, but I did. And the other thing is that I wish the police would give us half the respect that we seem to give them. I know why they think that they are the Board of Aldermen and that they can go to the state and go around what we think, and that they can testify. Irrespective of what the Board Alderman thinks, we want to be able to live out the city and go to a Republican legislature and a Republican governor and do it. And then we turn around and say, whatever the police want. I don't blame them for thinking they're in charge of the city. So I don't see, I'm sorry that other people haven't read them, so I won't have a big problem with sending it back, but I'm not going to vote to send it back. These are things that one by one you could look at. If you were for the original bill, you will really be for this bill that, the amendments which clarify and helps to clean up some things. So at some point, we, the Board of Aldermen, are going to have to remember that we are we're the people that's supposed to do oversight. We're supposed to make sure things happen, and that the police department really is a member of our community, and they are civil servants, and they don't get to just be out there doing what they want to. And I appreciate that the public safety director may not like this, but I didn't like him going up with the mayor and the police chief telling them to disregard the Board of Aldermen either. So I am old enough I know about Big Brother. I mean, it's been a concern for many, many years about what happens when you start to get all these cameras and you violate people's rights, and they're everywhere, and you have no right to privacy. So there is a competing interest of safety and a right to privacy. And again, I have read each and every one of these amendments. None of them do any harm. They are to address issues that people brought up before. I want to thank the Alderwoman from the 8th, and I will be voting no to send it back to committee.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 17th.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to first state that I appreciate the work of the Alderwoman from the 8th. She's gracious enough, along with several other older people who have been involved in this, to call me yesterday, and I got the things last night. I'm one of the folks that have been hesitant to, reliant on some of the taxing districts to evaluate it. And, I think they're grateful that they were made an exception. However, I had contacted one of them, one of the people who had been kind of monitoring it for me, and they were grateful, but did not are not in support of it, and that kind of concerns me. I do think that there's been a real effort made by the Alderwoman from the 8th. I do have a couple of questions on this, Alderwoman, if you have just a sec, if you're okay to.
Alderman, it's related to the motion is to refer it back. So in your questions to the Alderwoman, they have to kind of link into the refer back.
I understand that.
Okay.
I guess
I'll ask her to yield.
Referring it back would be contingent upon if some issues were addressed, and I was just trying to figure out how those issues were if they were addressed.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Yes. Would you still like her to yield?
Yeah. Just
okay.
I think it's just one or two very quick questions.
Okay. Alderwoman from the 8th will yield the questions to Alderman from the 17th.
Yes, I will.
Sure.
Alderman from the
Alderwoman, thank you again for sharing that last night. I appreciate your efforts on this. I applaud them. This is a very important issue, I think. some of the things that are going on in China with facial recognition software is something we should all probably be concerned about. One of them was, it is getting kind of bizarre. There's a TV series, I think called Black Mirror or something, where they're trying to modify people's behavior based on rankings and stuff. And that is actually occurring in China now, where China is giving you social points for, or detractions for misbehavior if they catch you on camera. It's just bizarre. If you jaywalk, they'll take points off from you and so forth. So I think it's very important. I guess one of my concerns is of course, the surveillance cameras have been, despite at least my experience, have been very helpful in solving a number of crimes in our area, both throughout the West End and in the Grove. We've had 3 incidents in the last several weeks over in the Grove, and we have caught people on the cameras. One of the issues I heard was, I guess, and again, I'm not terribly up to speed on this, was the whole chain of custody issue, where if somebody in one of these taxing districts has something, and I was very confused by that discussion. I'm not an attorney, so and I had heard at one point that there was a concern that your bill created chain of custody issues or something. Does that ring a bell at all, or?
And I understand what chain of custody is, but I don't think that this bill in any way impacts that. That is some into the weeds discussion that would come up more in a policy. But again, all we're doing is looking at what technology exists. We are not asking for the Board of Aldermen or the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency to have access to any data whatsoever that is recorded on surveillance technology. We're asking to know what it is that is out there and know how long the city entity that is storing it, but we're not asking to see it. So I don't see how this would interrupt chain of custody in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, I guess it was somebody was talking, and again, this is all vague to me, and are all new to me, but someone I thought had told me that there was some problems with that. Another concern of mine would be, and again, I have not heard from them, is large parts of my ward are part of institutions. We have WashU and BJC and St. Louis University. They have, I believe, significant surveillance systems. How would that be impacted by this?
That's a good question. So city entity, let me look back at this definition one more time. It's a governmental, so any agency, department, unit, commissions, or unit of the city of St. Louis, or any governmental unit operating within the city of St. Louis. Under that definition, I would say that does not include academic institutions.
Okay, so I believe they are separately chartered with the state for their security.
Right. I don't think that would, yeah, because unless they had cameras that they had directly tied into the city real-time crime center, or the city police were systematically using it. And that's what the amendment is trying to get to, because then the burden at that point to report it would be on the police department, not on the academic institution.
So I'll be honest with you, I do not know if those are tied in. I just assume that they were. They have an extensive camera network. I know it at the WashU BJC campus. And I would think they probably do on their Hilltop campus, and I believe St. Louis University does as well. And I just presume that they are all tied into the real-time crime center. So what would that mean then?
Well, then if they are, then that becomes the police department, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department's responsibility to report on that they have that access to that camera, and that they are the ones who then will be reporting the data back to the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency and the Board of Aldermen about.
Does that require anything of those institutions then to do any reporting?
No, because what we're looking for is what the city entity is accessing from from the academic institution.
Okay, so this in no way, so if they have their camera system, this is no way regulates what they're already doing out there. Is that
I don't believe so, no.
And then, and I'm sorry, I should, you know, I tried to do this. I got home late last night and kind of read through it, and I was trying to understand these. Your definition of surveillance, and I should probably pull that up, but I recall, does that mean visual surveillance, or does that mean other types of surveillance, as in like sound or noise or other electronic type of monitoring?
Yes, yeah, it does. So it is a pretty thorough definition of surveillance technology on page 2, starting on line 13. And that is, it's any electronic or other device, system, vehicle, or software that is capable of collecting, capturing, and recording and transmitting information. And that includes whether audio, visual, or still imagery, thermal imagery, genetic, biometric data, and other data. So yes, it includes all of that. So we have like the shot spotter. We also have had police using Stingray technology to intercept cell phone communications. That is all included under the definition of surveillance technology.
And I have just a vague recollection of this, and it might have been the Stingray technology that you're talking about, but I recall reading, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, where the federal government had given the St. Louis Police Department some access to some incredibly technical data that it sounded like it was almost like a national security type of deal, where it was almost top secret type of technology.
Right.
Is that the Stingray technology that you're talking about, or what technology is that?
That I don't remember specifically what it is that you're talking about, but I know that Stingray technology has been very much, it has been used very quietly in the city of St. Louis, and only discovered through lawsuits.
That sounds like what I, and again, I have vague recollections of this. This isn't an issue I particularly followed closely, but as I recall reading the article, when some of that came up, it was almost like they didn't want to have anybody know about it, because it was like almost national security level. It was a type of technology that was, so guarded that they didn't want people to even know about it. And I'm wondering, does that, how would our local ordinance, would that even be able to regulate something if it's shared with us by if the federal government shares it and that technology is somehow or another regulated under federal law?
If the technology is being used by the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, whether it's under an MOU with the federal government or direct use of ours, it is required to be reported on under this ordinance. It does encapsulate that data. And the issue is that we're using taxpayer dollars to surveil US citizens, right? And so there are very significant civil liberties concerns when we're doing that. And so the transparency is what we're asking for. What is it that they have? What is it that they're using against our own citizens, or to surveil our own citizens or observe? It is not always oppositional, but that's what we're looking to see what it is that's out there. And this technology is constantly changing. So the definition has to be broad to be able to encapsulate that kind of stuff. And we're a leader in national geospatial technology in St. Louis. It's exciting. It's a really great thing for us, but that also means that we need to have reasonable restrictions in place to be able to know what it is that is being funded by taxpayers and being used in our civil life.
But aren't most of these civil liberty issues really almost constitutional in consequence? I mean, aren't these really not local? I mean, certainly they should be of everyone's concern, but I see what's going on in Washington today with, trying to regulate everything from Facebook to Twitter, and you get into these constitutional issues of freedom of expression and your privacy and things like that. It just seems that the resources of the federal government are so much more, are better equipped to really stay up on top of all this technology as it's evolving and frankly provide guidelines on it. I would think that, if there's abuses happening at the local level, would that not be something that would be addressed, in federal court if necessary, if there is clear violations, and something that would be addressed through federal, at the federal level? More
that's one way to tackle things. There are, U.S. constitutional protections for privacy. There are also state level protections for privacy that is under the Missouri Constitution. We pass laws at the state level. We're asking to pass legislative guidance here in the city of St. Louis to regulate ourselves and our own police department in accordance with what we and our citizens think is acceptable for the city of St. Louis. So yeah, there are bigger things that citizens can get to here, but a lot of this we're trying to look out for each and every one of our citizens in an equitable way, and not just have them have to defend their constitutional rights in federal court.
And as far as I guess, as far as the resources of the city right now, and again, I'm not really sure what the resources are, if this is time or effort or just bandwidth upon our department. I guess my concern is our murder rate this year is over 200. Last year we were in the top 10 in the world as far as murder per capita. And I've said this before when we begin talking about some of these public safety issues, is this trade-off that we have between public safety and our civil liberties. And we frequently, I hear people say, oh, we compare ourselves to Western Europe or in places like that. And I just think that, my gosh, if a country in Western Europe had a per capita murder rate like us, they'd have martial law declared. And if we had 20 years of our murder rate here in St. Louis, we would have lost more people in St. Louis than would have been lost almost as many as would have been lost in Iraq over the last 20 years. It's just, I just get a little concerned about taking our, the staff of our public safety director, and I just feel like they're overwhelmed over there right now with the number of issues that are coming up, and that's my reservation, that and not having heard from frankly Jim White, who I think we all caught. I haven't had that discussion. I've said enough. I'm sorry. I'm going to sit back and I'm just trying to understand what's going on and get up to speed on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman from the 22nd.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I second this motion to refer it back to committee because I think process is everything. I certainly appreciate all the hard work that the Alderwoman from the 8th Ward has put into this since the summer. However, I wasn't privy to those meetings, so I'm not sure, what all the discussions were. I know I was very interested in hearing from the public safety director, the chief of police, the technology director, the director of CREA, during the public safety hearing before it came out of committee. We heard a lot from proponents during that hearing. There was minimum testimony from opponents or just people to provide their expertise about how this process can roll out and what the impact it will have on different departments. The Alderman from the 8th Ward was not very interested in that. I think she said that they knew about it, the public safety director, chief of police. But when I spoke to them, it came real fast. And so they were not able to rearrange their schedules to meet the demand of the hearing. Certainly, I think this is laudable. However, I am also concerned about what are we trying to fix? Have there been instances whereby the police have abused surveillance technology in order to railroad somebody, if you will? I would just like to hear more discussion about it, from the departments that will be impacted. I also have some challenges with some of the advisory board member makeup, but I would like to discuss that more in a committee setting and not necessarily right now. I think this does warrant going back to the committee. I think it came out of committee with some understanding from different aldermen on different issues. And it's just real appropriate. I think we're doing a disservice to the public if they cannot hear from the public safety director or the chief of police at a minimum. I mean, the departments that would be directly impacted by this. And then we have a chief technology officer that we're paying very good money for to kind of help us understand, you know, how this data flows, and could probably give some real helpful advice to make the bill even better. So we didn't do that. We kind of rushed it through committee as far as I'm concerned. Certainly other people would disagree with me, but not having these individuals testify is a little concerning to me. And again, the committee hearing, it basically had people who were very supportive of this board bill and not people that may have had trepidation about it. So thank you.
Thank you. Alderman from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm planning on supporting the motion to send this back to committee that's before us now. I certainly think there's probably a version of this bill that I would support. And I know we're certainly concerned about, you know, technological creep and overreach of surveillance. But one of the reasons I want to send this back to committee, and a concern I raised, I think last time we discussed this bill, and I believe the Alderwoman from the 8th has made some efforts to correct some of this as it relates to this broad definition of city entity. So I guess we're going to exempt these local taxing districts from that definition per the amendment proposed by the Alderwoman. But we've still got this broad definition that basically somehow is authorizing us via ordinance, which we have no ability to do, to regulate the state of Missouri would be considered a city entity under this, by state. I mean, the zoo, all these things that are governmental entities that we're now under this bill as written, somehow going to regulate and give the director of the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency power to, I guess, access their surveillance and monitor their surveillance and issue violations. It just seems so broad. I would support something that deals with our police department and our city camera systems, but I think this goes well beyond the scope and our oversight authority. And I just think it needs to be very much narrowed down. And I don't understand sort of the reluctance also to include the stakeholders from these various organizations as part of this discussion. I mean, you know, it's my understanding that, you know, the police department, the public safety director have expressed, and the city's Dr. Gaskell Clemens have all expressed serious concerns with this. And you know, I don't understand why we wouldn't include them in a discussion to get something that is fair and that provides the type of oversight we want. So I'll be voting to send this back to committee. I do appreciate the Alderwoman's efforts on this subject.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I did read the amendments. I've read the bill several times as well. And I'm listening today, the Alderwoman from the 8th helped make my decision to support this going back to committee. It was very clear when she mentioned that the federal and the state already have protections in place. And even if this was to pass our board, it would not have any legs to stand on because we don't supersede state or federal. The other part about this is, in hearing from everybody, if you have not had that open discussion with those people who are responsible for our camera systems, the protection of the information that we receive from those are vital people. And I tell you one entity I've heard nobody talk about, which is one of the most significant entities, and that's our emergency management system. They deal directly with Homeland Security, all of that. And so you really got to listen to some of these folks and get some information. I have nothing against Cream over there, but they are not equipped. They are not equipped with all the information that is required. And with that small staff over there, I don't think the budget is adequate because they can't do this work. But I think if you get a clearer understanding, you may even decide that you could include it within the systems that could do it easily. So I need to support this going back to committee because there are a few things that I think we could clear up. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the first.
I was going to disagree with the Alderwoman from the 8th about us being able to override what the federal government had in place. But the Alderwoman from the 19th has already made the point, so I don't need to say that. Anything that's federal, I don't care what our little ordinance says, it does not supersede that. So other than that, I'm still going to vote no to sending it back to committee. But I would tell the Alderwoman she has control of her own bill. She can put it back on the informal calendar.
Alderman from the 23rd, and then Alderman from the 8th. Your hand's been up the whole time. I don't know about the. Go ahead, Alderman from the 8th. Are you wanting to speak?
I would like to speak on the motion.
Okay, all right, go ahead, Alderman.
Thanks. I tried to indicate that in our chat box too here. I want to thank you all for the suggestions for the careful review of the bill. I just want to remind folks that this bill has had multiple hearings in the Public Safety Committee that have heard from this current Public Safety Director, the current Chief Technology Officer. There was an audit produced last year by the Chief Technology Officer that was more than 6 months late per the resolution that this body passed requiring that audit. And that audit was full of holes. I also thank you, Alderwoman from the 19th and Alderwoman from the 1st. I did not mean to say that we could supersede federal law or the Constitution. I mean that we can also hold our own ability to give our constituents clarity around privacy protections that they are entitled to under those laws as well. And I do want to note that there are 16 cities that have passed similar legislation. There's been minimal administrative burden. Part of what we are trying to do with an advisory committee is remove some of that burden from the overtaxed Civil Rights Enforcement Agency as well, so that there are citizens who are weighing in at every step of this process. I also want to note that I have previously I am speaking on the motion, Mr. President.
Okay, yeah, perfect. All right, so make sure to stick to
There have
the
been a lot of questions
motion.
during this discussion that have been off of the motion, but we've entertained them. And this is specifically to the motion. I have been scolded for not raising questions in committees that I am not a part of in the past. We have passed bills out of committee to have further discussion on the floor of this body as a full body to be able to amend it and make the bill into what we want it to be. So, Mr. President, please move Board Bill 95 back to the informal calendar.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Place Board Bill 95 on the informal calendar.
So noted. Board Bill 135, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of a subordinate taxable tax increment revenue note series 2021 in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $25 million, containing a severability clause.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill 135.
Yes, Mr. President, I move for perfection of Board
135.
135.
Second.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th, second by the Alderman from the 10th. Alderman from the 17th, please proceed.
I renew my motion.
Alderman from the 1st, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill 135. On the discussion.
Mr. President, I don't need to speak. I don't vote for tax increment financing in the 17th Ward, so I will just request a roll call.
Okay. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 17th, you recognize the close.
I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we perfect Board Bill 135. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus,
No.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Aye.
Alderman Bosley,
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Aye. I'm sorry, Alderwoman Evans, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Oh, perfect. She got you that time. Thanks.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingracia,
Aye.
Alderman Coder,
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice, Alderman Gunther,
Aye.
Alderman Balmer,
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin,
Aye.
Alderwoman Grass,
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Green,
Aye.
Alderman Odenberg,
Aye.
Alderman Rhodey,
Aye.
Alderman Todd,
Aye. Aye.
thank you, Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Vaquero,
Aye.
Alderman Narayan,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro,
Aye.
President Reed,
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice. 26 aye votes, 1 no vote, and 2 present.
I vote stay in the motion. Alderman from the 17th and perfected Board Bill 135.
Board Bill 144, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance repealing ordinance number 68294 and 67089, authorizing the execution of a new lease agreement between the City of St. Louis, Missouri and SI Warehousing Corporation, Inc., a Missouri corporation, for a period of 10 years with 2, 5, and 1 year mutual options for the purpose of mooring only of 1,683 linear feet of anchorage and mooring for bargage and other vessels contain the severability clause.
Alderman from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the
Hold
board.
on a second, Alderman from the 7th. Excuse me, Madam Clerk, which board bill were?
I'm sorry, we're on 144.
Yeah, so.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, let's go back to board bill. 144. I lost count here. Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to move for passage of Board Bill 144.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 19th.
Second.
Seconded by the Alderman from the 14th that we perfect Board Bill 144. Alderman from the 1st.
Yes, Mr. President and members of the board, if the Alderwoman from the 19th would yield, I have a few questions I was trying to understand.
Alderman from the 19th will yield the question to the Alderman from the 1st.
Yes.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Alderwoman. So on page 1 of 3, line, the first whereas says the lease there's a lease that was 25 years, which has expired, and that was under ordinance 62537. And then there was another lease, I guess, that we're in the middle of. That was ordinance 68294. But what we're going to do is extend this second lease before it's expired. Is that what we're doing?
Right, so that it will coincide with the new lease, and both of them will be renewed at the same time at the next expiration period. They were a little messy, and I wanted to get those cleaned up.
I get it. I was just trying to make sure I understood it. I was like, okay, wait a minute. Okay. So you want them, so when they come up, they come, instead of being stagnant, that you want them, staggered rather, that you want them so that they end at the same time.
Absolutely. You have better negotiation power.
Well, I was here for when they were negotiated, so I'm going to keep my opinion to myself. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I have no further questions.
Okay, any further discussion? Alderman from the 19th, you recognize the close.
I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 19th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill 144. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Board Bill 145, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a new lease agreement between the City of St. Louis, Missouri and SI Warehousing Company, a Missouri corporation, for a period of 10 years with 3 5-year mutual options containing a severability clause.
Alderman from the 19th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill 145.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This is another lease in that same area, and it's just a renewal. And one of the things I want to share with you is that in our negotiations, something we've been working on for the last 2 or 3 years at the Port Authority, we have increased the lease by a significant amount. And you will see also in that on each one of those 5-year periods.
All right. You went to mute, Alderwoman. Oh, yeah, there you go. You're back.
Okay.
All right. We missed the last half of that.
Okay. So in our lease part.
The Alderwoman, you like to make a motion to perfect Board Bill 145?
I'd like to make a motion to perfect Board Bill 145. Go right ahead.
Moved by the Alderman from the 19th, entertain a second on that motion.
Second.
Seconded by the Alderman from the 21st. Now, please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you, sir. And so this is just a second part for renewing another lease there. And we have negotiated with the increase in value for those leases. And you will continue to see that process take place. Some of those were still being charged at 1975 and 1978 rates, but we're here in the future, looking at the future, and you will see more income from those leases. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on the perfection of Board Bill 145? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 19th, seconded by the Alderman from the 21st, that we perfect Board Bill 145. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. By your vote, you perfected Board Bill 145.
Board Bill 141, sponsored by Alderman Coder, an ordinance adopted and approved pursuant to 701.220.1 revised statutes of Missouri, authorizing the director of the Department of Public Safety and police commissioner on behalf of the City of St. Louis to make and enter into an agreement with the United States Department of Interior National Park Service for both agencies to provide cooperative law enforcement assistance within the city limits of the City of St. Louis, including the Gateway National Park, and containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 7th. You recognize on the perfection of Board Bill 141.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move to perfect Board Bill 141.
Moved by
Second.
Alderman from the 7th, seconded by Alderman from the 10th. Alderman from the 7th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we sit here, we are, I guess Wednesday was the 55th birthday of the Gateway Arch. This board bill is seeking basically to memorialize what has pretty much been the informal agreement between the National Park Service rangers on the Arch grounds and the old courthouse and the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, as long as the Arch has been in existence. Basically, what we're seeking to do here is just memorialize a cooperation agreement between the two law enforcement agencies for the area immediately surrounding the Gateway Arch. Contrary to some of the conspiracy theorists out there, this doesn't authorize the National Park Service to be rolling through the city streets as we've seen in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. I mean, the agreement is clear that it's within and immediately surrounding the Gateway Arch National Park. And this came to be as we've had some challenges downtown with crime, especially in the spring and summer months this year during the pandemic. We are sort of just brainstorming any possible idea to put more officers on the street downtown and to help with the issues, especially, some of the stuff, both north and south legs of the Arch and on Lenore K. Sullivan, which are all city property, not national park property. And someone said, well, what about the park rangers? And so we started looking and we talked to the park rangers, and it sort of we came to the conclusion that, oh, wow, we don't actually have any sort of formal agreement with the park rangers. So that's what this is seeking to do is memorialize that relationship. And I know in past, the park rangers, if they see a crime committed on the city street, immediately adjacent to the federal property, that they usually will act. But this just sort of codifies that, and vice versa. The city police often patrol, especially during special events, large gatherings and things, will patrol federal land on the Arch grounds. Fair St. Louis is a perfect example where we have most of the police forces on the Arch grounds, when we have Fair St. Louis. So we're just putting that in writing. I'm happy to answer questions. I don't think this is going to lead to really much of any changes in how these two agencies interact. We're just memorializing it. I will say, I believe the National Park Service has approximately 20 park rangers. I mean, that's the extent of their force. It's not exactly a large force on the Arch grounds. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Alderwoman from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, and thank you to the Alderman from the 7th. You did answer a couple of the questions I have, but I have a couple of more if you would be willing to yield.
Sure. Alderman from the 7th, yield. Alderwoman from the 15th, please proceed.
So if this is just contained to Gateway National Park and codifying that, I don't really take issue with that. I think the language that I am concerned about is throughout the board bill, it says within the city limits of the city of St. Louis, including at the Gateway National Memorial Park. It doesn't say like limited to and so for me, when I read that, I read it as, yes, we're definitely saying that policing is happening at the park, but it's inclusive of the entirety of the city. And so I think that is where a lot of concerns from folks come from. And so is the intent that this is just for the Arch grounds? And if it is the vicinity around the Arch grounds, do you know how far of a vicinity away from the Arch grounds that this agreement would be in place for?
So, Alderwoman, that's a good question. And I see the language you're discussing there on lines, I guess, 10 and 11 of the bill. I mean, I looked more closely at the agreement, which the language of the agreement is clear that it's, lands and roadways within the city of St. Louis, Missouri, within and immediately surrounding Gateway Arch National Park. Now, do I have a radius for you immediately surrounding the Gateway Arch National Park? No, but I think that is fairly clear that it's the Arch grounds and the area. I would think immediately surrounding would be, Lenore K. Sullivan, 4th Street, some of those adjacent parcels that are city owned. I don't think it would include like Tower Grove Park, for example.
Okay. And when something else I wasn't clear about from reading the board bill or the agreement, say, you know, police from the Department of Interior arrest somebody, are they subject to, you know, going through civilian oversight if there's a complaint against an officer? Do those same safeguards that apply to SLMPD also apply to federal officers?
I don't believe so. And I think the same would be true of any other federal law enforcement agency. I mean, they're not subject to, you know, disciplinary action or our oversight, our civilian oversight board. No.
Okay.
But this does set forth, you know, sort of the proposal. If you know, if a federal, an NPS officer, for example, were to arrest somebody in the commission of a felony or misdemeanor that they deemed worthy of their time, it sort of sets forth that they're supposed to, you know, contact the police department and involve the St. Louis Police Department in that arrest.
Okay. And sort of along the similar lines, if somebody were to be arrested by one of these federal officers, does that mean that the charges that are put against them are automatically federal?
No, not necessarily. In fact, I can remember a time as a former prosecutor where a park ranger brought in a state charged DUI to me when I was in the warrant office. I mean, no, they could come down to the warrant office theoretically and apply on a state charge, you know, if they wanted. I don't think that happens very often. And I can tell you, I don't think these park rangers are interested in making very many arrests. This is just more for the instance where, you know, they see somebody smash into something or break or damage property or do something that they kind of have to act on.
Okay. That's all of my questions for now. This was very helpful, and I definitely appreciate you doing that. I would like to request a roll call. Just, I'm not a no, but I would like to vote present on it.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. If would the Alderman from the 7th yield for a question, please?
Alderman from the 7th, we yield the question to the Alderwoman from the 8th. All right, please proceed, Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you so much, Alderman. I share the same concerns as Alderwoman Green about the difference in the language of the board bill itself and then the contract that does declare immediately surrounding Gateway National Park, but the city limits in the board bill itself is. If we were to try to expand that contract, if that contract was to be expanded to further than the immediate area, is that something that would have to come back before the Board of Aldermen to ratify?
Yeah, yes, I believe so. I mean, we're passing a board bill, basically putting this agreement in ordinance. If they want to amend the agreement, it's going to have to come back here.
Okay, I think that was a bit of a fear first reading just the board bill saying that they can be used throughout the city. My concerns are the ongoing protests in DC where the National Park Service has been used to pretty significantly crack down on protests, and coming up on a controversial presidential election and the grounds downtown being a place where a lot of those protests occur. I think it's a little bit concerning for me. So I'm also not at a no, but I do appreciate you raising those distinctions today and understanding that if we were going to expand any sort of agreement authority, it would come back to the Board of Aldermen. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the Alderman from the 7th yield for a question?
Alderman from the 7th. Alderman from the 24th, please proceed.
Thank you. Alderman, just a quick question, I guess. What would it take at this point? I have heard some of the concerns again regarding the same concerns that the Alderwoman from the 8th brought up regarding, you know, what we've seen in some other jurisdictions. What would it take at this point to tweak Exhibit A here, this general agreement, to get a more defined scope on where exactly this patrol would be. I know that you've indicated kind of where you think that the scope would end, and probably where it logically makes sense for it to end. But I know you're an attorney as well. I always just am concerned when I'm looking at contracts and there's any ambiguities there. And I think that given what we've seen in some other jurisdictions, you know, that is a cause for concern to some folks. So I'm just curious if it would even be possible at this point to revisit the scope of where the patrol would be.
I mean, anything's possible, Alderman, but I can say that that's not something I'm willing to entertain here today. I think within and immediately surrounding Gateway Arch National Park is clear enough. And frankly, as the Alderman of all the areas immediately surrounding Gateway Arch National Park, I can say that and I think the business owners and residents would welcome the National Park Service officers if they saw a felony being committed, you know, say on Laclede's Landing or Shoto's Landing or 4th Street. I think we'd welcome their involvement if they felt the need to roll up on their bicycles and assist or apprehend somebody, you know, committing property damage or violence downtown. I think this is clear enough. You know, I really don't believe you're going to see, I mean, again, we're not Washington, D.C. The whole city's not federal property. I don't think you're going to see these 20 bike rangers out on protest duty, you know.
Totally understood. I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. The Alderman from the 7th touched on what I wanted to reiterate to everyone for clear understanding. The Park Service Rangers are government rangers. And what you see in DC, they are actually on federal land doing their job. When you look at all the national opportunities that you have around the White House, the Capitol, all those places, that's an appropriate place for them to do their job. But it's not appropriate if they came into the city of St. Louis above and beyond an immediate area around their facility, the federal government facility that they share with the city of St. Louis. So one thing I don't think we ever have to worry about is them getting in a vehicle and traveling to 20th and Washington or Wells Goodfellow or any place else. So I just wanted to just make that real clear. And maybe if you attach their job description to your contract, maybe that can help everybody and make it a part of the record. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 7th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. And I really do appreciate everyone's questions on this. I mean, believe me, if this was a bill to be expanding, you know, federal authority well into the city of St. Louis, as we've seen elsewhere, that's not something I'd be interested in. You know, as the Alderman of the 7th Ward and representing the areas, including the Arch grounds, I work closely with Mike Ward, who's the superintendent of the Arch. He's a wonderful man. He's a St. Louis native. And his rangers are great. And they are, you know, I mean, they spend part of their day as tour guides, you know, telling people about St. Louis. I think they're great ambassadors. And this was just simply, as I said, codifying the 55-year relationship. As we got into the weeds this summer, thinking about strategies for downtown crime, it became apparent there was no formal agreement. So that's what we're doing here today, is formalizing the agreement between the two agencies. I would appreciate your favorable consideration, and I renew my motion.
Been moved by Alderman from the 7th, seconded by Alderman from the 10th, that we perfect Board Bill 141. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley,
Aye. Aye.
Alderwoman Evans,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingracia,
Aye.
Alderman Coder,
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice,
Present.
Alderman Gunther,
Present.
Alderman Vollmer,
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin, Alderwoman Grass,
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Green,
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Alderman Rhodey,
Aye.
Alderman Todd,
Present.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderman Narayan,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Navarro,
Aye.
President Reed,
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus, Alderwoman Martin,
Present.
(22) aye votes and 6 present.
By a vote, staying the motion, Alderman from the 7th and perfected Board Bill 141.
That is the extent of board bills for perfection.
Third reading consent.
Board Bill 94, 113, 126, 127, and 134.
Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize on the motion for the third reading consent calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the third reading consent calendar.
Second.
By Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th and the Alderwoman from the 14th. Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded that we adopt our third reading consent calendar. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman.
Aye. I have a voter for, somebody else voted for me, but aye.
Alderwoman
I was
Middlebrook.
wondering about that voice change.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
Aye.
Alderman Coder.
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Alderman Gunther.
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Grass.
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy.
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Rhodey.
Rhodey's aye. Rhodey's aye.
Alderman Todd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderman Ryan,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
President Reed,
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin,
Aye.
Alderwoman Green. 28 aye votes.
By your vote, you staying the motion. Alderman from the 22nd and 3rd read and finally passed the aforementioned bills. 3rd reading, report of engrossment,
We have none.
report of enrollment,
Board Bill 94, 113, 126, 127, and 134.
all other business being suspended, the president shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. The one from the 19th, you recognize on the motion for our courtesy resolutions calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move that we adopt our courtesy resolution calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 19th, seconded, I believe, by the Alderman from the 21st. Any discussion? Or 22nd, that was 22nd. Any discussion? Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded that we adopt our courtesy resolution calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. First reading resolutions.
Resolution 63, sponsored by Alderwoman Howard and Alderwoman Murphy. The Bevo Community Improvement District.
Alderman from the 14th, you recognize on the first reading of resolution 63.
Yes, I would like to explain that this resolution reappoints several members of the Bevo CID. We've just recently had a new district manager appointed. These are overdue appointments, so I would appreciate the consideration of my colleagues here in appointing this and moving this forward.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
Mr. President,
Yeah, Alderman from the 22nd.
is there a motion on the resolution?
Resolutions can be discussed without motions.
Okay.
But I'm gonna go back, I'll go back to her in a second.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th, would you like to request unanimous consent?
I move and request unanimous consent from my colleagues for passage of and confirmation of these members of the Bevo Community Improvement District.
Second.
Hearing no objection, please proceed, Alderman. Would you like to make a motion to adopt it now?
I would like to make a motion to adopt the members of the Bevo Community Improvement District appointed by the board.
In resolution 60.
Resolution 63, I'm
63.
sorry.
All right, that's all right. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderman from the 13th, that we adopt resolution 63. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Second reading.
Resolution 61, sponsored by Alderman Collins Muhammad, President Reed, and the following alderpersons: Alderman Boyd, Alderwoman Davis, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Middlebrook, Alderwoman Evans, Alderman Bosley, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderman Todd, and Alderman Vaquero, urging residents to vote no on Proposition D.
Alderman from the 21st, you recognize on the second reading, resolution 61.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for approval and passage of resolution number 61.
Moved by the
I
Alderman from the
second that.
21st, seconded by the Alderman from the 23rd. Please proceed, Alderman. Alderman from the 21st, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Resolution number 61 is expressing the Board of Aldermen's opposition to a special interest outside campaign known as Proposition D. With that, Mr. President, I renew my motion.
All right, Alderman from the first.
Mr. President, members of the board, with the permission of the primary sponsor, I'd like to add my name, please.
Madam Clerk, please add the Alderman from the first name to resolution 61.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right.
Mr. President, I rise in support of this resolution. The people on the other side of this resolution are people that are my political friends, and I like and respect. I just think they're wrong. Oftentimes when we get an outcome that we don't like, such as a mayor who becomes the mayor with 32% of the vote, people say we need to do something. We do need to do things, but the devil is in the details of what you do. And so when you go out and you don't sit down and speak to people who've been in this for a long time, what you get is a outcome that is, you think you're addressing the issue, and it might be something that you want, but a lot of other people will not like it. We had a substantial hearing for several hours Wednesday regarding this resolution. And a lot of people who came, they spoke in favor of it, which I still support. I don't care if I support something or not. I'm supportive of people being able to, the citizens being able to come and express their opinion. And I want to thank everybody that came out to express their opinion. But one of the people that came was the comptroller, who has been in office since 1995. And she expressed her resolution, her resolve not to support Proposition D, and talked about the problems, and talked about that when you're going to change something in November and then try to implement it in the next election, which would be in March, that it would be confusing to people. It will be. I've been in office before the comptroller, and when you change things, it confuses people. This whole thing of how to vote absentee versus mail-in ballot has gotten people really crazy. A lot of my votes were not, many of my votes were not counted in the primary election because people got confused about what they were doing. When people have done things for a long time, they don't even notice when you change things. If you change a polling place and someone has been going to that polling place for 15 or 20 years, even though they get that card that says your polling place has moved, those people still go to their old polling place because they are conditioned to do that. I do not want to see us have people who are elected with 32% of the vote. I think that is a mistake. I also do not want to see people who went out and gathered this petition. And I'm not talking about citizens, but I'm also talking about elected officials who doesn't affect them. Okay, so then I heard at our hearing from people who said, well, how dare the Board of Aldermen take a position on it? How dare the Board of Aldermen not take a position on it? And the first thing I want to tell, and I read this into the record, I want them to know, when the citizens do an initiative, it comes to the Board of Aldermen before it does anything. In fact, it says you have to submit it to the Board of Aldermen, and we have so many days whether we act on it or not. But I think it's young. it's trying to throw shade, to use young people's vernacular, to say that if the Board of Aldermen has an opinion about how something affects how we run for office, that somehow we should, as citizens of the city of St. Louis and representatives of other citizens, shouldn't have an opinion about it. Most certainly we should. If you do something to change how doctors do things, they have an opinion, lawyers do things, but somehow if members of the Board of Aldermen somehow disagree or say, or we take a position as a body as a whole to say, this is not a good thing, then somehow, oh, shame on us. Shame on you for not even knowing that it had to come to us in the first place. But I can excuse you because a lot of you are getting in the process. You haven't been in it. And so you don't really know the process. And that's the good thing about sitting down with people like me. I know the process. I would have sat down and talked to you about what is wrong with this thing. If you had talked with the comptroller, she would have sat down and talked with you. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't go ahead and do it anyway, but you might have had some insight. One of the things that the comptroller brought up that I thought was just very informative or just right on point was that we were going to address the president of the board, the mayor, the comptrollers, the members of the board, but we weren't going to address the county officials. Okay, they were going to have, so we're going to do a two-tiered situation, whereas we would have to run under one situation and the county officials, some of who are supporting it, not to mention the state reps and other people who are maybe out there supporting it or pushing this thing, but they're not going to have to be subjected to that. That's ridiculous, okay? If I am going to change something that the county officials, how they run, I would talk to them. You did not take a minute to talk to us as though we are all criminals and something's wrong because we might have a difference of opinion. We might be more informed than you, and you might learn something. That's what I learned my first year as a city alderperson. In 1991, the former First Ward Alderwoman Joanne Wayne told a group of us, when we were upset, you came down here knowing everything, so I let you bump your head. So a lot of times people, when they want to do something, they think anything beats nothing at all. It doesn't. Proposition D does not come close to being a good proposition. I don't care how many people get out there and tell you it is. It is not. It is not correct. It is not a good way to do things. You could have set a threshold to say, well, if you get 45% or 49%, there's no runoff. But you want to go and say somebody could get 49%, somebody could get 22%, and that may be the runoff, and then we could coalesce. And so that person who got the initial 22% could actually be the winner. You don't want to have partisan elections. I want partisan. I like partisan. I like to see a D and a R behind the name. But I also brought up at the hearing, and I want to remind people, we had a Republican for a lot of years down here. He was very honest in who he was. He ran as a Republican in the 12th Ward, Fred Hyder, and he was here for the longest period of anybody, and he ran as a Republican. We also had a independent by the name from the 22nd Ward by the name of Kenneth Jones, and he was here for a very long time. So you don't have to run for a Democrat to be elected official in the city of St. Louis. You have to get out there and do it. We have, a Green Party? We have still independent you can run. The reason that people sometimes put the D behind their name when they're really not a D is because they want to be part of the process of the seniority and enjoy the perks of being a Democrat, okay? And so when it didn't work for them, some people then ran as an independent and then won and then came back and they switch over to a Democrat. I've never, and so when people do that, and we have several members right now who are my political friends, I tell them, then you lose out that seniority at that time because you were an independent, and that is rightfully so. The problem I have with people not having a D or I or a Republican R behind their name is that I think that D stands for something. I'm a Democrat. I think it stands for something. It stands for my principles. And so I don't like nonpartisan. I don't like it either, as I have studied immensely about civil rights and about redistricting and gerrymandering and the things that they do. When there is a part in a city, and you can go look this up, is that when people of different backgrounds start to take over city, people they start to panic. And so they find all these ways to change things so that the status quo can stay in place. Even though they say, oh, we're changing it, what they're really doing is keeping the status quo in control. So when you go from 28 to 14 aldermen, that's so the status quo can be in control. In fact, when I always speak to the fact that right now we should have 14 Black aldermen at the very least, but we don't. But nobody puts up their hand and says, well, let's change that because that's the status quo being in control. Even though African Americans are the majority in the city, the very people who say, oh, we won't change, do not want fair change. That's why when people start talking about reparations and people say, well, I didn't do it, I always want to say, but what you did do is you took the bounty from slavery. You took all the rewards from slavery, and then you say, oh, well, don't hold me responsible for it. Well, give everything that you got back from slavery back. When you cheat at gerrymandering, give all that back. The millions of dollars that's been robbed from North St. Louis, give that back. So now here we come. One of the things that they do with a power grab is they start to go to nonpartisan. They go to large districts or no districts at all. You run at large. All of that is a way to attack power structure when the power structure starts to change to something else. And people will tell you, well, look what happened to our mayor's race. I'm appalled at what happened to our mayor's race. And this could have been something that I could have supported. But the way you wrote it is something I cannot support because it is too much of a problem the other way. In an attempt to fix something, you actually exacerbated and made the problem worse to me. And so oftentimes I have sat here at this Board of Aldermen, I've voted against citizens review over and over because I said it was not the correct way. And each time they came back and they made it a little bit better, but it's still not. And so at the end, I voted present because it's not. This is not addressing what needs to be addressed. It might be for a person who felt like they were aggrieved because if there had been a runoff, right. Okay, and I would say if you set some threshold, but if you just say, we're just going to all feel good and we're going to say, well, all those people who lost, they can get together and then they ultimately can be the winner, I'm not interested in that. If somebody gets 48, 49%, I'm okay with them being the person. Am I okay with 32%? No, but I'm equally not okay with this board bill. And with this proposition. And so for me, I wanted to support the proposition. I went and actually got the actual petition from the Board of Elections because I just like to make sure that what I'm reading and what I'm going on is correct. And so the more I hear about Proposition D, the more I'm opposed to it. As I ask people questions about it, their answers were not what I wanted to hear. And so that thing of, well, we just wanted to do something because the mayor got in with 32% is not the thing to do. The other thing was that they were protecting me, my Black self, because they split the Black vote. Well, then Black voters better get more educated and don't let themselves be split. Next election, this is coming up. All you got to do is, what happened. Don't let it happen again. You got to be more educated. You got to know that people do this on purpose, and you then can coalesce and have your vote go to one candidate. So I don't need anybody to look out for me as a Black person. What I need to do is make sure that my community is educated, and I do that over and over and over again. This takes away my power. I cannot support Proposition D. It is not written well. It is not good. It is not in our best interest. And I want to thank the sponsor of bringing this resolution up. Someone said, well, why were we doing this at the last minute? Well, what could have happened is that somebody else could have brought a resolution in support of Prop D, and we could have had the conversation. I didn't do it. So I most certainly couldn't be criticizing somebody else who brought it up. Late as it may be to some, it is still before the election. And so I'm hoping that people hear that we, the members of the Board of Aldermen, have a right to take a position on how we are elected, just as the comptroller did. And she took her time to come and to give very good reasons why she did not support it. And so I am in full support of the resolution against Proposition D, and I will be out there with a ballot against Proposition D. Thank you so much. I have no further comment.
Alderwoman from the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I have to say I agree with the intent of the proposition to address the outcome of an election where mayor or an alderman, for that matter, gets elected with the minority of the vote. I think election reform is not a bad idea. In fact, I think it's something we should explore. I like the idea of a two-round system, nonpartisan style. I think many cities, even nations, are moving to a two-round system. This is a pretty unique proposal. I think it's somewhat complicated. And I have a couple of questions, and I'm not sure. I'd like to maybe direct them at the sponsor. I'm not sure we're going to have answers, but I do have a couple of questions that have come to mind recently about it. The first one, I'd like to first inquire of the sponsor of the resolution if he would indulge me in a conversation about Proposition D and inquire of the Alderman.
Alderman from the 21st, will you yield the question to the Alderwoman from the 20th?
Only if she agrees to buy me coffee after session.
Alderwoman from
Absolutely.
the 20th, please proceed.
Thank you, Alderman from the 21st. To whom does this voting mechanism apply? The way I read it is the mayor, the comptroller, the president of the board, and aldermen. Does it apply to all city elected offices?
No, not at all, Alderwoman. And it should and it could if the supporters and proponents of this campaign and this initiative, if they were serious about transforming election law or increasing voter turnout, then they would have worked with the state legislator and making sure that we have an inclusive all-around initiative, because our treasurer is important to elections. She controls our city's banking accounts. Our license collector is very important and essential. They are virtually in charge of every business in the city of St. Louis, from a Snooks to a mom and pop shop. Our collector of revenue is essential. And I think we all know that every time we have to pay personal property taxes. So this seems targeted, in my opinion, Alderwoman. It seems targeted towards people who directly affect our communities on an everyday level, that being the members of the board of ENA and the members of the board of aldermen. And the biggest proponent of this proposition, Representative Rasheen Aldridge, he is a member of the state legislature. He could have introduced legislation to change election law. And there are current legislation on the table right now in Jefferson City that changes election law for state senators, state representatives, and our statewide officers. Unfortunately, he was too busy allowing the state legislature to circumvent the will of the voters on city residency for police officers. But if the people were genuine about this, and it didn't seem motivated or targeted by some odd or suspicious reason, then they could actually introduce a real plan that would include every elected office in the city of St. Louis, and they haven't done that. They rushed this through. And they keep using Fargo, North Dakota as an example. And even in Fargo, North Dakota, when they passed this new style of voting, they did it 2 years after voting on it. They didn't do it immediately, 6 months after the election. And I think that's the problem. This just seemed rushed. It's motivated by something else, and it does not do anything that the supporters are alleging that it does.
I share concerns that it doesn't apply to all city elected officials. The other concern I have is related to vacancies. So the way I read this is, if you've got a vacancy, it's a two-tier system, but it doesn't follow the approval style of voting. Maybe I'm misreading the proposition there, but the way I read it is that aldermen who come in on a normal cycle would follow the approval style voting. But if we have a vacancy in any of those offices, it would be a simple two-tier voting system without that approval style. I could be wrong in my reading of this, but my concern would be that some of us would come down here under different voting mechanisms, and if we have a vacancy, would we then have to sort of retrain our voters on how to vote for the office that they are used to voting for? could be very confusing if some, I think if I count correctly, 4 or 5 of us are down here now, having entered the Board of Aldermen following a vacancy. And so it's not that unusual. And if we have 2 ways of voting for people, it could be very confusing for our voters. Another question I have is about, and you're gonna have to indulge me because I'm gonna get down in the weeds here. It's unusual to put forward to see an ordinance or a bill that addresses something for which we already have ordinances or bills in place without repealing something. And that had me wondering, so this is layering on top of existing ordinances related to our elections. It doesn't repeal anything. So I think the city charter, is fairly silent on whether or not we have partisan elections, and they kind of grant the city the authority to have nonpartisan or partisan elections through ordinances. And so digging through the ordinances, and look, I have not done an exhaustive search here, but we grant ourselves the authority to have nonpartisan candidates through an ordinance passed, I don't remember when this was passed, under Shrewsbury. I think he sponsored it, so it was a little while ago. But it provides for a nonpartisan candidate to be on the ballot, but it's required that they have signatures. And in order to get on the ballot, you have to get 2% of the signatures as of the last mayoral election. Do we know if that applies here? And if we have nonpartisan candidates running, that you'd have to get signatures before the election? I don't know the answer to this. I called down to the election board this morning. They don't know the answer to that. So I guess the concern would be if filing opens for our positions and the positions of all, some of these, the comptroller and the mayor, on November 22nd, would candidates be expected to have to get signatures to be on the ballot prior to November 22nd? I don't know the answer, neither does the election board, but I think it's a question.
That's the way
I would open it to my colleagues who may know the answer. Excuse me, because I don't know the answer, but I do think it's concerning that we haven't discussed that. My third question is about process. And if we're going to do election reform, and I think we should have a robust public discussion about it. This proposition was put forward by signature gatherers, which I think is a really good process to consider things. But when that happens, it goes to the Board of Elections, and the Board of Elections delivers it to this body by way of our president. I believe that happens sometime in July. And my question is really,
by the way of the.
I have the floor, Mr. President. I have the floor, Mr. President.
Alderwoman from the 20th, I'm the president. Alderwoman from the 20th, I'm the president of the Board of Aldermen. I always have the floor. This is my job. That's what I do. So Alderwoman of the 20th, it is delivered to the clerk. That's what happens with these things. They're delivered to the clerk, and then any alderman has the right to take those things up. Please proceed.
Mr. President, I have been down here for 5 years, and I have never seen you interrupt anybody speaking to make a correction until just now.
Alderwoman, you're
I would like to proceed.
Alderwoman,
okay?
Alderwoman, please proceed with your if you have anything further to add. If not, we'll move on to the next person. If you have anything further, please proceed.
I would like to continue to
Would you
discuss
please
the point
continue,
that I was making.
Alderwoman? Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Alderwoman.
The point I was making is that we could have had a robust public discussion about this if it had been brought before the Board of Aldermen. And I think, I guess my question would be for you, Mr. President, as to why this wasn't brought before the body to have a robust public discussion at that point.
Alderwoman, if you understand the way these things operate, you as the alderperson from the 20th, once the clerk receives the bill or the initiative, you have a right to, or any other 28 members have a right to bring it up for discussion. if you had all these questions, you should have brought it up for discussion, but you missed out on that opportunity. So thanks to the Alderman from the 21st, you now have an opportunity to ask questions, but you certainly missed out on an opportunity if you had so many questions and concerns and would like to have seen it change. You had the right to do that, but you lost that right when you did not act in a timely fashion.
Mr. President, was the bill delivered to the body of the Board of Aldermen by way of the clerk? How were we made aware that the clerk received it?
Alderwoman, I'm not going to engage in discussion with you. In any debate with you, you can ask the clerk of that. Any of those things, any of those questions could be easily answered by the clerk. But again, those are questions that you should have asked before this meeting today. Those are questions that you should have asked months ago. I mean, it was well known that people were out collecting signatures, but you let that opportunity slip. So now that you let that opportunity slip, there's nothing else we can do about it here today.
Mr. President, I don't share that responsibility. In fact, you have concerns about Proposition D, as you've mentioned yourself. I think we, as a body, I would agree that we failed to have a robust conversation about this. I was asking about the process through which we could have done that. But I do share some of the concerns of the Alderman from the 21st. I agree with you that he has, brought some of those to us, and I appreciate that. I hope that my questions added to this robust conversation that we're having today. Thank you, Mr. President. That's all I have.
Alderman from the 9th.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I actually took my hand down.
Okay.
But since you called on me, I'll go ahead and talk.
Okay.
To follow that up, so I just, I again wanted to thank the Alderwoman from the 1st, the Chairwoman of the Rules and Resolutions Committee, for having a broad public discussion on this during her committee. I believe we spent about 5 hours together a couple days ago, allowing public testimony on this. For my colleagues that weren't able to be part of that public testimony or weren't able to watch the full 5 hours of the committee, I just wanted to mention a few things. There was, we allowed for public testimony. We had, I believe it was 21 speakers show up to speak on why they thought that Proposition D should be given consideration. Out of those 21 speakers, we had, as was mentioned, we had our Comptroller Darlene Green was the one that spoke against it, mainly because she had a lot of questions similar to the Alderman from the 21st about, maybe this being rushed and needed to be kind of vetted a little bit more before we come out and support it. But out of those, the other 20 people that were there to speak for it, I just wanted to mention that these are not outsiders, as keeps getting kind of pushed into the discussion about this as, oh, this is an outside group that's pushing this. The 20 speakers that we had, they're my constituents. They're constituents of the 20th Ward, the 15th, their 7th Ward, 8th Ward. We had a lot of constituents coming and speaking for this that just want to see a fair way of elections through the city of St. Louis. And honestly, a lot of people that were not too happy with 2 major elections that we've had over the last 4 years, where some of our top representatives have been elected with, around 30% of the vote. So this was brought forward by the people of St. Louis. This is not outside organizations that are pushing dark money, which keeps getting thrown out there. In fact, one of the speakers for Proposition D was a representative of the League of Women Voters that said, they took offense by the fact that this resolution that we're debating right now, says outsiders are influencing it and dark money is influencing it. Well, the League of Women Voters was there testifying to say that, this is something that they thoroughly vetted where this money was coming from. And the group, the Centers for Election, whatever it's called, the Centers for Elections that that funded a grant is actually less than a quarter of the money that has come in to be able to help put this in front of the St. Louis voters. So I just kind of wanted to say, I believe that, this is the discussion we're having now. It's going to be up to our voters come Tuesday. But the arguments being made that this is dark money is false. The arguments that this is being run by outsiders, not from St. Louis, is false. Whereas in fact it is supported by the League of Women Voters, who I believe have the best interest in democracy of any group that I know. So then one other thing I wanted to just kind of mention, and I mentioned this, the Alderwoman from the first and we've had a lot of discussion on this, and I think it's important that we don't always have to agree on things, but it's important to get these kind of facts out there when the discussion being made for this resolution that this full board opposes Proposition D. A lot of that is based on this fact about Fargo not wanting it, and Fargo being the only place that's doing it. Whereas in fact, we did have a speaker from Fargo that showed up. That was one of the, I believe his name was Jed Limke, I had written down here. And he came to our Zoom meeting to say, as a person that's in Fargo, that there is no effort underway to get rid of this in Fargo. There is no effort to repeal it. And in fact, he did brought statistics that showed that that voters were more engaged and that voter turnout was greater by having a process where if the first person you voted for doesn't win, you still have a chance to come back and vote on the best of two candidates. So because of that, it does increase voter turnout. So I know some of my other colleagues here have some more things to say on it, but I just, personally believe that, as an individual elected representative, you can speak to your, voters. You can kind of go out there and say you're for this or against it. But just as a body, for us to come out and say, oh, we're opposed to Proposition D, I don't think is right as a body. I think just, let the people decide on Tuesday, but just get the facts as they are. That groups like Action St. Louis, like the Organization for Black Struggle, the St. Louis American, the Service Employees International Union. These are groups that are behind Proposition D and are supporting Proposition D. So I feel that it's wrong for us to kind of beat this drum of this is all run by outsiders that's here to disenfranchise voters, and that's their motive, when you have organizations that are very much for engaging voters supporting this. So that's all I say. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. The Alderman from the 9th said a lot of the things that I was going to say. And I once again do want to thank the Alderwoman from the 1st for allowing us to have a very robust public discussion on this in committee a couple days ago. I think that those public discussions are very important, and giving our constituents the ability to come and testify on things is very important. Few things that I just want to bring to our attention. 80% of cities in our country right now have nonpartisan elections. Kansas City has nonpartisan elections. Chicago has nonpartisan elections. This is not something that is really that radical. It's something that's actually pretty mainstream. And I think it's important. I think it's important for a city that is, by all intents and purposes, a one-party city where everybody runs on the Democratic label. And I think we know through our disagreements at the board that what it means to be a Democrat is a very big tent in this city. And I think that moving to nonpartisan gives us the ability to run on issues, run on the things that we believe in, and not necessarily be couched by a party label where people assume that we carry certain viewpoints or stand for certain things because we have that D next to our name. I think that is a common sense move for our city. I thought it was also wonderful to be able to have somebody from Fargo come and testify on their experiences with this in Fargo, and not just a constituent from Fargo, somebody who actually sat on the commission to study how to reform their electoral system. What he did is he walked us through their process, and that, after they had a series of elections, just like we've had a series of elections where people were winning their elections with very small percentages of the vote, the city put together a commission and asked those folks to study, how do we address this issue? It doesn't seem very democratic that folks are winning elections with 15-16% of the vote. And so through this commission, with the support of two of their members of the council who were driving a driving force behind this, in addition to the mayor, who was wildly supportive of this, they engaged a number of national organizations, the Center for Election Science being one of them, to help educate them on what are voting systems in order to address this issue. And approval voting is what they came up with. The gentleman from Fargo also testified that after this went into effect, they had the highest voter turnout than they have had in 20 years in Fargo. And so these claims that this is somehow going to depress or disenfranchise folks, I think it is not accurate based upon the experiences of the folks in Fargo. And, I think that, we've had a lot of conversations about, this being some kind of dark money operation with, from outsiders. I will say I had constituents reach out and talk to me about this probably 3 years ago for the very first time, and come and talk to me about it, maybe a couple times a year, checking in as they were trying to figure out who do we engage to learn more about these different electoral systems. And I think our constituents went through a lot of the same process that they did in Fargo to figure out what was a system that was going to address some of these issues we have in our democratic system here in the city, while also being cost effective. And I know that they looked at other voting mechanisms. They looked at ranked choice voting, which would be much more expensive to implement in our city because of the changes that would have to occur to our voting machines. And I would say having a quarter of their money funded by this outside organization whose job is to study and be an expert on electoral systems is not so different than the grant that we just accepted from I think it was Facebook and some of those tech companies in order to help update and modernize our election systems here in the city. We do have a lot of problems with dark money in our political system. And I really hope that in the future, when, the Joseph Wingate Folk Society decides to mess in our city elections again through their actual dark money PAC, where we actually do not know who any of their donors are, that this body will be willing to take a stance against that dark money group that continues to try to influence our local elections. In terms of the county offices, I understand the critique on this, but I will say a couple of things. City, Board of Aldermen, Comptroller, Mayor are elected on a different election cycle than our county offices. And if the county offices were moved to this system, a couple of things would have to happen. First of all, we do not have the local authority to change the elections for those county offices. That would take a change in state law. The other thing is, if we were to move those county offices to an approval voting system, then we would have a two-tiered type of voting system on the same ballot. We would have county offices that were using approval voting on the August and November elections, and then we would have all of our statewides who would ostensibly not be using an approval voting system. That would create a very confusing system, and something that I vehemently think that we would need to avoid. This is a test, though. This is a way for us to start to refine our democratic systems. And if and when this works locally, then we look at taking this to the state level, much like we passed the minimum wage here. And even though it was repealed, it then gave us the organizing and bargaining ability to then be able to take it statewide and get it passed. And so I think that we can, in a lot of ways, be a leader on something, and be a leader on democracy reforms, which I think is a really good thing. And then the last thing I'll just say is, there's a resolution like this, in theory, is supposed to represent a unified position of the Board of Aldermen. And this does not represent a unified position. Are there changes that I would like to personally make to the Proposition D proposal? There definitely are. And I also think that absent of a uniform agreement of this body, that we all stand in opposition to this, the way that we all, stood together to say, yes, we support not repealing clean, or, we support, I'm trying to think of other resolutions that have gone through this board where we've had unanimous, agreement when we are advising our constituents on something. And this is not a unified, unanimous agreement around this. And I do think this will probably pass today. I am just, I'm standing there with my constituents who collected signatures on this to get this onto the ballot. And also just want to make it known that I am not, I do not think that we should be weighing in on this in this way. This directly, it was led by residents across the city. I think a lot of these, it just doesn't look good for our body to be standing here fighting something that citizens have said that they at least want to be able to take to a vote to see if other folks believe in that. So once again, I want to thank the Alderwoman from the 1st for allowing the robust discussion that we had the other day. And I will be voting no on this today.
Right. Alderwoman from the 14th.
Yes, I have concerns about this because of several of the questions that were brought up previously. And I would also like to add my name to this as a co-sponsor. I thought I had requested that, and apparently it's not on there.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please make note of that. The Alderwoman from the 14th, add her name to Resolution 16.
I think we need more discussion around this because it leaves out the county offices and it causes more confusion. If we're going to move ahead with this and it's going to be in place for the spring elections, I think we're confusing voters and we're causing a lot of bit of anxiety amongst those that truly wish to do the right thing by us. Whether it's partisan, nonpartisan, I think that the line should be clear and it should be consistent throughout all offices of the city. Yes, there are several municipalities in the surrounding area that use this, but I don't think it's quite the Fargo model. And I think that we should delve if this is something we want to do. I think the partisan thing has been institutionalized. I'm not saying that we can't change, but I think that if we do change, there needs to be more education for our voters, and people need to be involved in this decision. And we need to get the county offices on board. And I know that takes place through state legislation if that's the way that the voters decide to take this. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alderman from the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a lot been said. I have a lot to say and maybe even question. I find this process, without disrespecting anybody, almost laughable. It appears that this whole process is targeted toward one goal. Nonpartisan election is not uncommon. They've been doing it out in St. Louis County for a long time. You run one time. Everybody just run for mayor and the best person wins. And it's not a runoff. Either you win mayor, you win council, or you don't. So it's not uncommon. The fact that we would go all the way across the country to find some people to help us reform our government is just interesting to me. I feel like the city of St. Louis government structure, we're becoming guinea pigs. I mean, we've already, supported the reduction of the Board of Aldermen to 14. It got passed by the voters, although a lot of, there's a lot of conversation about voters who just really didn't understand what they were voting for. But there are a lot of progressive people who wanted to change, city government, and it got done. I just want to suggest that, the alderman that's currently with the Board of Aldermen, if you don't like the partisan system, don't be partisan, just be independent. We have a couple of aldermen, the 8th Ward, the 15th Ward alder people, they ran as independents. That's great. And I think they are very good independent thinkers, and they have shown that. They are not necessarily Democrats. They don't seem to necessarily be Republicans. They are independent thinkers, and they're independent people, but yet they have chosen to be part of a party system. Nobody forced them. They ran and they were elected as an independent and of their own choosing, decided that they will become part of a partisan system. Now, it's been said, and you guys know me, I don't hold back, and I'll just say what needs to be said. So, there's the whining about, oh, the mayor's race, the person won, didn't have 50-something of the vote, it wasn't a mandate. And oh my God, if the second person that only lost by 888 votes, if it could have been a runoff, that person could be mayor. Guess what? I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that if there had been a runoff election in 2017, we would probably have a different mayor today. But that's not the system that was in place. And so what it looks like to me is there's bitterness. There's an old saying about, I think, I want to support, and I hope I've shown this, that, you can be a gracious loser. And then you have to be careful sometime about being a bitter winner. This seems to be, to me, nothing less short of a setup of the 2021 mayor's race, so that we can so-called prevent all the people from getting in the race. And then what emerges is a couple of people, then we have this runoff. Well, guess what? I reject the fact that people say that, there are spoilers in the race. For everyone, especially progressive people, that talks about democracy, it's hypocritical that you would say that certain people don't deserve an opportunity to run for office because they're not what you're looking for. Now, those are my words, not yours. But everybody has a right to run for public office. That is what democracy is about. And to try to create a system in which it's been said that we don't want spoilers. Well, who in the heck are you to decide if somebody's a spoiler? Why couldn't somebody want to run for public office because they actually care and love the city of St. Louis and they want to do goodwill? I don't think that's fair. When you have a chance to change a system, technology has come a long way. A long way. I got involved in technology in the 90s, and it's come a long way. But it seems like every time somebody creates a software program to eliminate a problem, the hackers find a way to infiltrate anyway. Okay? We can try to, I don't care what system we come up with in the city of St. Louis, somebody is going to find a way to manipulate the system. With the Alderwoman from the 15th yield for questions.
Alderwoman from the 15th will yield the questions to Alderman from the 22nd.
Yes, I will.
Alderman from the 22nd, please proceed.
Alderwoman, I think you ran a phenomenal race when you ran for president of the Board of Aldermen. I think you're highly intelligent. I think that you are someone who can lead. You ran in a race with an incumbent president who's an African-American. You ran in a race with a very well-known African-American female senator. And I will just ask you, if you had won that race with 40% of the vote, would you still support a runoff election?
I would. And I actually talked about this in committee. My first race for elected office when I ran as an independent, I did not get over 50% of the vote. I think I got in the low 40s. And I'll be honest, even back then, that made me uncomfortable thinking that I was going into elected office without majority support of my residents. And I think that runoff systems are just good governance to make sure that we do have folks that feel that people in our city feel can represent the majority of their viewpoints.
Sure. So let me ask you this. You ran as an independent, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you ran against a Democrat that was appointed by the committee system, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what you did is you challenged that system and you said, look, I'm not for that party system. I want to run on my experience and what I'm willing to do to serve as Alderman of the 15th Ward, correct?
Sort of. I mean, I was vice president of the 15th Ward Democrats at the time, and had been a long-standing Democrat, and also knew that the person that the committee woman who wanted to run for alderwoman was not supported by a broad swath of our community. And that was very evident in the voting results at the end of the day.
Well, I think that may be subjective, if you don't mind me saying that, because there are some people who have a very robust network of supporters. And there are some people who don't. But just because you don't have a robust network of supporters does not make you an inferior candidate. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Okay, and so there are times in which there may be a person who has really done the work, if you will, and has been involved in the community, but who hasn't been flashy about, look at me and look what I have done. They just do the work. And oftentimes those people may get overlooked. So if you have a network, a very robust network of people who will support you, it would be conceivable that you would probably overshadow somebody who's just doing the work. Would that be a fair assessment?
I mean, it could. I would also say that in elections, you have to put in the work, even if you're more public facing, if you don't put in the work, you're probably not going to do very well come election time.
Sure, absolutely. And that's why the type of voting system that we have kind of works, because even though you are a name brand, even though, not to disrespect anybody, but even though your name may be Clay, or your name may be Slay, or your name may be Jones, or your name may be Bosley, or whatever that brand dynasty name may be, you still have to do the work, correct?
You do.
Okay, so if you do the work and you win by 45% of the vote because you did the work and you put forth a plan that can really uplift the quality of life of the people that you serve, why is that not enough?
I think what we're really talking about in this system is when there's more than two people that run for an office. And I think what we're doing is giving our residents more of a choice. So if your first choice is somebody that maybe is a longer shot at winning, but you still want to, be able to circle that box for them, you can circle that box for them while also circling the box for somebody that you also like, who might have a greater chance at winning, but still has the, the views or the character, whatever it is that you like.
But if you have 4 really, really good candidates, I mean, they are all good quality candidates from their educational background, from their public service experience, from their life experiences, what they do in the community. That's good, right? So you have 4 great choices, right? But this new potential system would suggest that you cannot vote for who you think is the best of the best.
Yes, you can.
Get to vote for several people as alternatives. Now, like I'm going to vote for Alderwoman Sharon Tyus because I think she's best qualified. But yet I'm gonna also vote for Marlene Davis as my second choice, and then maybe Jack Coder is my third choice because it becomes more palatable down the line. And so it becomes a game of the weakest link to me. And it's just Jeffrey Boyd talk. You ever seen that show called The Weakest Link?
I have.
So The Weakest Link has this interesting strategy. You can bank money and gain money and ride with somebody that seems to answer a lot of the great questions, and you can get rid of the people that don't answer a lot of correct questions. And they are truly the weakest link. You don't answer a lot of the correct answers, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, but also there's a strategy. I can get rid of Alderwoman Sharon Tynes because I think she's the smartest person at the Board of Aldermen, but I'm gonna get rid of her because she's really the stronger person, but I'm gonna make her the weakest link because I think I have a better chance of beating Alderwoman Marlene Davis. Does that make sense? That does happen in that show, right?
It does. I don't think that's exactly what happens in approval.
Okay. No, now we're gonna disagree. It's subjective, right? Because I mean, you have your thought and I have my thought, so I'm just gonna play my game. So I'm gonna play the game of manipulation because that's what it becomes. The weakest link is a game of manipulation in a way. And then what happens, this great idea that we come up with all voting for every candidate you want. It sounds so good, and may the best candidate win. It's no such thing as may the best candidate win. It's going to be the best. It's going to be the candidate wins with the best strategy.
I don't think that's
how people are going to win. And so we're going to kind of go back to what was said about establishment. I think it was mentioned about establishment. So if the establishment has its way, if I'm part of the establishment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest that I'm going to be heads over heels for Annie Rice. And that's my number one choice. But then I'm going to pick on Tamika Hubbard because I think she's really the weakest candidate. And so I'm going to ask as many people as I can, please vote for Annie Rice, but vote for Tamika Hubbard too, as number 2 candidate, because if Tamika runs against Annie, we're going to make sure Annie wins. That could happen. Would you agree?
It could. I think what could also happen is that if people are very undecided between 2 candidates, which I know often happens, they like 2 candidates a lot, they can vote for both of those candidates and know that their viewpoints are represented in both of those candidates. I think that strategic voting piece would be a very, very small part of people's decision making in this. And I think that, the majority of folks are going to vote for the people that represent their views and their values.
Yeah. And that's what we should do, right?
It is.
We should vote for people that represents our values. And I guess that winner take all strategy is just that's not a good democracy anymore. Is that what I'm hearing?
The problem is when that winner take all creates a system where people do not have the support of the majority of people in the city. And so that runoff election is what creates more democracy, because that runoff election essentially is saying, the top 2 with the highest, number of vote counts from that first election, then go head to head, and the winner of that is then the office holder. And so the winner of that would have to get over 50% of the vote.
Sure. So let me go back to your election, for example. And let's say that you were number 1 with 40% of the vote, and the person behind you was, let's say, Miss Senator Nasheed, who got 32% of the vote or whatever it is. And then it went to a runoff. Now, let me suggest to you that the chances of you winning after you got 49% of the vote in that runoff was going to be very small. Understanding St. Louis politics.
I think that's not necessarily true. And I think a good example of that would be Randall Wolfen, who was an insurgent candidate who ran for mayor in Birmingham, Alabama. he won that race in the runoff. He was about, I think, 15 percentage points behind the incumbent in the first round of voting. But then the other support came up behind him in that runoff, and he ended up winning, being the youngest mayor to serve in Birmingham, Alabama.
Isn't that phenomenal?
It is.
That's based on voter manipulation. Okay, so what had happened was you get a groundswell of people who didn't vote for you. They got together and they supported the candidate who had 15% behind you. They all galvanized around that particular candidate and took that election away. I don't think that's democracy. I think that's voter manipulation, but that's just my opinion.
I think that's coalition building.
Well, it doesn't mean that that person was the best candidate, right? Because if the majority of the people votes 49%, even though you didn't make that 50+1 threshold for that particular candidate, democracy in my mind, and a lot of people I talk to says, you should win. You should win. Now, just look, I ran for mayor in 2017. I can't tell you how many times people said, hey, you know what? You know, I like Lewis Reed, but you gave me a second thought about, you know, I like you, but I've known him, and so I'm voting for him, or whoever it was. I heard that over and over again. So I understand how it could potentially work, but I don't think that's a good system. You know, I think that the whole winner takes all is a better strategy. But let me ask a few more questions. So you're of the opinion, and I don't want to put you on the spot for speaking for the group. So if there's someone part of the automatic coalition for Prop D is head of the group, I would really like to address the question to that person. So are you the person, or should I address it to somebody else?
I don't know that any of us are the head of a group. I don't think we've had those discussions. I think all of us support this because, for example, the 15th Ward Democrats, our ward org, voted to support this. And so I am carrying the views and viewpoints of my constituents.
Okay, so let me give you a rest. Mr. President, because she's a lawyer and she's very brilliant, I would like to know if the Alderman from the 8th Ward would yield.
Alderman from the 8th will yield the question to the Alderman from the 22nd.
Yes, Mr. President.
Alderman from 22nd, please proceed.
Alderwoman, how long have you known about this Prop D initiative?
From the time they started collecting signatures.
I'm not, and because I haven't paid enough attention, would you indulge me and tell me about how long ago that was?
To be honest, off the top of my head, I cannot tell you.
6 months ago?
Time has taken on a new meaning during the pandemic. I think it was at least 6 months ago. Yes, I think it was last year sometime.
Okay. And how did you hear about it?
It was brought to my attention by one of the proponents. There was a kickoff event. They brought in folks from the Center for Election Science to come and talk, and I went to an informational meeting.
And you thought it was a great idea?
I have not signed on as a public endorser of Proposition D. I have put out a sample ballot saying that I personally going to vote for Proposition D. My ward organization also has supported a yes vote on Proposition D.
Okay. Thank you, Alderwoman. Mr. President, with the Alderman from the 9th Ward yield for questions?
Alderman from the 9th will yield the question to Alderman from the 22nd.
Might as well.
Yeah, please proceed, Alderman from the 22nd.
Thank you, Alderman. I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk to you and ask you some questions because you seem to be very passionate about Proposition D, but I wanted some legal opinion, so I have to save that for somebody else. But so tell me, how long ago did you become aware of Proposition D?
My answer will be similar to the Alderwoman from the 8th. I believe it was last spring, maybe. It was definitely over 6 months ago, probably about a year ago. And your next question is probably going to be, how did I find out? I have a handful of my constituents that were not only at the public testimony in the Alderwoman from the first committee hearing, but also one of my constituents who was kind of leading up the effort to try to get a new proposal a new proposal for voting. So they came to one of our ward organization meetings probably last spring to speak about their petition gathering process and to talk about Proposition D.
And you think it's a great idea, correct?
I did not say that. Similar to the Alderwoman from the 8th, I have not signed up to publicly be the spokesperson for this, and I still have a lot of questions about it.
Oh my!
So,
you know what? Not trying to be disrespectful. Sound like I'm hearing backpedaling, because I know you were very adamant about making sure that people be able to testify for this resolution. I looked in, I zoned in and out of the hearing that was heard, which I thought Alderman from the first ward did a really good job on the public input process, and I certainly appreciated that. But it seemed like you were pretty much for this. And so now what I'm hearing is you're really not sure you're for this.
no, I didn't say that. I think I was pretty clear in saying, similar to the other Alderwoman, that there is no spokesperson at the board coming in and saying that this is a good idea.
I got that, but I want your opinion. I want where you stand with this.
Yeah,
So,
I think I made that clear during the testimony. I don't know if you were zooming in and out of the testimony. I believe that, you know, having an opportunity for for the citizens of the city of St. Louis to say that they believe that there is a problem with the way that our existing elections go, and give them the opportunity to collect signatures and put it on the ballot. So my ward organization has also supported this. I am also going to be voting for Prop D when it comes to the ballot on Tuesday. But there is no spokesperson on this board that is out there, beating the drums for this. So,
okay, but let me ask you this: how many of your colleagues have you talked to collectively, you think, about why Prop D is a good idea? About how many?
Oh, I don't know. I think, we sat through the committee hearing and heard a lot of people speak against it. I think
I understand that, and I certainly appreciate that. What I'm asking is, we go out, we have a beer, we just chat it up. How many of your colleagues, have you talked to that is support that just inform them? Not even if they came on board with you, but how many of your colleagues have you actually talked to about why you think this is a great idea?
I think there's been open discussion for over a year since the petition started going around about this. So I'd say probably half the board, at least, if not more, that I've either heard from or have heard my testimony at the hearing. So probably over half.
Okay, thank you, Alderman. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the enthusiasm. Mr. President, the Alderwoman from the 20th Ward, we were kind of on the same page on something. Like I said earlier, process is everything. And what the Alderwoman from the 20th Ward said earlier was that this doesn't repeal our current system. And I think that's kind of troubling. It kind of goes back to what the Alderman from the first ward said, that maybe if people had have come to the Board of Aldermen and asked for some opinions, maybe the bill could have been a little better, but I'm wondering if, this is going to put us in a real awkward situation with some conflict in our charter. And I'm not asking you to answer this, but I'm just, giving commentary that, certainly that was a great observation. And how will we deal with that? The other question that I have is that, how will the Board of Election deal with this? I mean, will there be enough time if it passes, which of course I hope it don't, will they be able to, revise their software, their voting machines, and do what they need to do to make sure that we have an election in accordance with, what Proposition D is suggesting? Mr. President, if the Alderman from the first ward wouldn't mind, I would like to ask her to yield for questions.
Alderman from the first, Alderwoman from the first.
Yeah, I'm here. Hold on. I was printing out some facts. I'm sorry.
All right. Will you yield the question to the Alderman from the 22nd?
I will.
All right. Alderman from the 22nd, please proceed.
Alderwoman, again, thank you for having a very transparent and robust committee hearing and allowing as much of the public to speak as possible during your hearing. I think you went well beyond what most chairmen of a committee would have wanted to do, even though I've seen it done. Have a marathon all-day hearing, but I think you did a great job. But I want to ask you, of the 21 speakers, what I heard was there was about 21 speakers, and the comptroller was one of the speakers that spoke. And then I heard there were speakers from the 15th ward and different other wards, but it sounded like, you know, with the exception of, I wrote down OBS and Action St. Louis, it sounded like most of the speakers were from St. Louis, from South St. Louis. Do you have any demographic data on, you know, what wards or what part of town that the majority of the speakers represented?
Actually, because of our clerk, or perhaps it was our clerk or assistant clerk, they did indicate, I have a list of the speakers, and a lot of them had the indication from what neighborhoods they were from. And because I lived in South St. Louis for 8 or 9 years, a good amount of them were from South St. Louis or Central Quarter, more from South St. Louis.
Okay, so what percentage of African-American neighborhoods do you think participated in those hearings?
Well, I will say not when you talk about the speakers.
Yes.
Not any, but there were Black people and African Americans that are on the committee, so we participated for our community. But actually coming to speak, and I want to speak to that. I was requested by the vice chair, my vice chair, the 15th ward alderwoman, if we could have public hearings. I could have invited people. I did not. I did not invite people because I already had pretty much my mindset of how I was going to vote. And I wanted to give the people who were in support of this the opportunity to change my mind. If I had invited people and we had invited that many more people to oppose it, we would have been still having hearings. So if I have my mind made up, I don't bring a lot of people in. I like to hear the opposition because there is an opportunity to change my mind if you bring something that is valuable or that I didn't think of.
Okay, so what I heard you just say, you like to hear the opposition, right?
Correct.
And you have African-American members of your committee that would represent those neighborhoods, correct?
Correct.
So, but yet the majority of the people who spoke were proponents of Proposition D. And so there were real public input from, and then when I say public input, I'm talking about outside the committee, because I discount we do represent our constituents, but I discount that when you're talking about public discourse. I think that hearing from members of the public is way more important and invaluable than hearing from us, right? As aldermen or members of the committee. It seems kind of skewed as far as where the support is, you know, without seeing, you know, North Side support, if you will. It almost suggests that North Side doesn't care. But on the flip side is, to me, it suggests that let me speak about the 22nd ward. And the first ward is probably a lot different than mine, because I know, you know, you've been part of a very middle class, you know, 21st ward for a long time. It's not very easy for me on a day's notice or even 3 days notice to get 3 people to show up at a committee hearing from my neighborhood. It's very difficult. But if you're from a more affluent neighborhood, if you're from you know, a neighborhood where the socioeconomic status of the people are, you know, are above average, you can probably get people to, you know, real quick. And if you're organized and you have a network of people that you work with on a daily basis, you can probably get 50 people to a hearing within 24 hours. Would you agree?
I would agree, and I would add, if you also have access to internet and Zoom and things like that, and if you have been notified. Again, I did not notify my community because we've already had conversations, so I didn't feel the need to bring, I probably could have brought that many. I didn't feel that need to do it because I'm their representative government, and if they'll have in 5 months, if I'm not doing what they want, they can vote me out of office. But because the alderwoman from the 15th had asked for that, and because I already knew, and I just want to give a perspective, everybody else on that committee supported the resolution. I believe that people who are on the opposing side should have a fair chance to make sure that they are heard. So that's why I did it. I didn't get the request. But we had our meeting on Wednesday, and maybe I got the request, and I'm just off the top of my head, Saturday or Sunday or whenever it was. So then I sent something to the clerk saying, I've had a request for a public hearing, and therefore I would like to do that. But we didn't have the request right away. So we couldn't have it, we couldn't have had a hearing any earlier, or we couldn't have had more notice is what I want to say, because I didn't have notice. As soon as I knew, then people had notice.
Yeah. I'm always intrigued by people that talk about democracy and what democracy looks like. And when we have this proposition put before us and it did not include the county offices, that wasn't democracy to me. To me, that was strategic, and that was a hidden motive. And so what I heard today is the alderman from the 15th ward basically said we have to go to the state, and it was complicated kind of sort of. I'm only paraphrasing. But let me ask you this, because you're a lawyer, is that correct?
That is correct.
So I'm going to read you something from the Missouri Constitution, Article 631. It says recognition of city of St. Louis as now existing both as a city and a county. So that's the reference. But I'm going to read to you what it says, and I would like and appreciate your interpretation, because I'm not a lawyer. I only pretend to be one, and sometimes it gets me in trouble. But I never take money from people. So what it says is the city of St. Louis, as now existing, is recognized both as a city and as a county unless otherwise changed in accordance with the provisions of this Constitution. As a city, it shall continue for city purposes with this present charter, subject to changes and amendments provided by the Constitution or by law, and with the powers, organization, rights, and privileges permitted by this Constitution or by law. As a county, it shall not be required to adopt a county charter, but may, except for the office of circuit attorney, amend or revise its present charter to provide for the number, kinds, manner of selection, terms of office, and salaries of its county officers, and for the exercise of all powers and duties of counties and county officers prescribed by the Constitution and laws of the state. Did I go too fast?
No, I'm familiar with the, I'm familiar with it. I've read it before, more than once.
So let me ask you this. So currently under Missouri Constitution, can we as a Board of Aldermen or with an initiative petition put forth to the voters whether or not the county offices shall be subjected to this Proposition D thing?
So I'm going to give you a lawyer's answer. Yes and maybe. And the yes is strictly by what you read. But if you also go along, if you start to look at the state statutes, the Missouri legislature has then implemented all kind of things that you would have to really bring all of those things into play. Like it talks about how much money our sheriff can make, or some, so they differentiate in the county offices. So they make state law that you would have to look at, because we can't override state law. I would say mostly yes, but I would have to gather every little piece of legislation that they have done over the years to see exactly where we are, if that makes sense to you.
Sure, and I haven't done my due diligence on when they created this, what was the effective date of this, whether it was last year or 20 years ago. But I do remember back in 2004, I believe, when there was this ABCD thing and there was going to be this restructuring of city government and so on and so forth. And basically what they did is they created St. Louis as a charter city.
Yes.
Is that right? Right?
Yes.
So what benefits do we have as a charter city? What's the point in that?
Well, the point is that we wrote our own charter, and so not that we're self-governing to a certain extent, because we were just reminded that even though we have a charter, which we got from the state and which says we control our police, that the state went right over our head and changed it anyway. But really, we have a governing document that other cities don't have, and it's our charter that our people get, that the residents that live in the city of St. Louis get to change with a certain vote, and we operate under that, and that is different than most of the state.
Thank you, Alderwoman. No further questions. Mr. President, I would like to note, and I'm sorry, it's hearsay, because I don't have it in writing, but when I did inquire of the city council's office on whether or not that we could put on the ballot Proposition D for the county offices, I was told that we could. Now, again, I did not get it in writing, but I was given this constitutional amendment to allude to the fact that we could. Mr. President, I want to go back to the Alderman of the 9th Ward, if he would yield for questions.
Alderman from the 9th will yield the question to the Alderman from the 22nd.
Yep.
Alderman from 22nd, please proceed.
Alderman, there's talk about putting on the ballot a proposition, same as D, to impact the county office for recorder of deeds and treasurer. Is that a board bill that you'd be willing to co-sponsor?
I believe it's been clarified that that has to come through the state.
No, it's not been clarified, but let's say we get clarity and it's okay. Would you be willing to co-sponsor that bill?
Sure. I think at all positions that you could have the same process for. So,
okay. Thank you. Mr. President, would the Alderman from the 8th Ward yield for questions, please?
Alderman from the 8th will yield the question to the Alderman from 22nd.
Sure.
Alderman from 22nd, please proceed.
Alderwoman, if it's determined that it is within our purview to put a Proposition D before the citizens of St. Louis that impacts the recorder of deeds and the treasurer's office, would that be a board bill that you'd be willing to co-sponsor?
So my understanding is that that has more to do with the charter than it does something that we could control by ordinances. So as a lawyer, I will give my similar lawyer answer is that it depends.
Okay, Alderwoman, I'm not asking for a lawyer opinion. The scenario is we find out that it's legal and it's within our purview. So the question is, if it's within our purview, would you be willing to co-sponsor a bill to put on the ballot that the treasurer's office and the recorder of deeds to be subjected to this new system Proposition D is proposing? Would you co-sponsor that bill?
If we could do it without confusing the voters by having two separate systems of voting on the same ballot, then yes. I think it's a great idea to have all of our city elected positions under the same type of approval voting design. I think it's very confusing because they're on that fall ballot at the same time.
Thank you. And let me ask you this, since you are a lawyer, wealth of knowledge, would you be willing to work on that board bill if it's practical?
I can do that. I do think it would have to be a charter amendment, but that's the little bit of research that I had done when this Proposition D came in front of me was what is the responsibility of us under the charter versus what is ordinance and what can we by ordinance control and what would need to be a charter amendment.
Thank you, Alderman. Appreciate that. Mr. President, if the Alderman from the 15th would yield for question, please.
Alderman from the 15th will yield the question to the Alderman from the 22nd.
Sure.
Alderman, same question. If it's found that we have the authority and it's within our purview to put it on the ballot, would you be willing to co-sponsor the bill?
I would add the same, I guess, clarifying statement as the Alderwoman from the 8th that my only concern would be creating two different voting systems on the same ballot. So if all of our county offices used approval voting, but then people running for state reps, state senate, governor, lieutenant governor had a different system on the same ballot, I think that could be confusing to voters. And so we might want to also, look at, do we move county office elections? Are there other ways to create that continuity between that, so we're not using two different voting systems on the same election?
Sure. Let me ask you this also. You said it would be cost effective.
Mm-hmm.
You will have this new system be cost effective. I'm just kind of thinking this out on if you had two people, and you probably know more about this than me, but let's suppose you only have two people that's running in the primary. So those two people get to go to the general election. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So does that cost you more money to do that than?
No, we have two elections right now. And so essentially what would happen is right now, the March election, the primary, ends up for all intents and purposes being the election, right? And whatever happens in April is just kind of the formality. What would end up happening in a two-person race is essentially that April election would become the one that actually matters in a head-to-head race. And so both candidates would automatically get through on that March ballot. But on that April ballot is what would really be determining that election. And when I was talking about cost effective, I was talking about the voting machines. So we would have to retrofit our voting machines to implement something like ranked choice voting. But our current voting machines can do approval. If you recall, when we vote for school board, you choose multiple candidates. You choose, two or three candidates, at a time. And that it essentially is a type of approval voting that's being done because you're voting for more than one candidate for the same office. And the ones that get the most votes are the ones that win.
Yeah, let me present an interesting scenario to you. So in the March primary, you and I run against each other, and you get 53% of the vote and I get 47. So then we move on to the general election. And because I'm able to get more voters out, I beat you by 60-40. Now, what I keep hearing is that if you get 50 plus one, that's a mandate. So there was a mandate in a primary that they selected you, but then when the general came along, they flipped. And they would flip only because who can get their base out best. Would you agree?
I think that's true for any election.
So are we really doing a good service for our constituents by saying that, well, with this new voting system, we're going to basically assure them that they're going to get the best candidate when it potentially could flip?
I think that where approval voting really matters and the runoff system really matters is when you have more than two candidates in a race.
Sure, and I agree with you. And it makes more practical sense that way, right?
Yes.
But that's not how this is written, right?
You would have elections on both, but for all intents and purposes, if I'm a candidate, I'm not going to put a ton of money and resources into a March election that I'm just going to have to run in April. I would flip it from what is currently done now, where we spend most of our time and resources on that March election, knowing that, if we have Republican challengers, it tends not to be, a challenger that.
Yeah, but the worst case scenario is that I beat you in the general election, but you beat me in the primary, which sounds kind of ridiculous, doesn't it?
I mean, I suppose it could happen.
Right. Yeah, and then it's like, it just throws this whole theory of this new system out the window, kind of, sort of, because the system suggests that, wait a minute, before you say no, just listen to hear me out. So with the system, what I heard is League of Women Voters, they said, hey, look, this system we got doesn't really work because there's no mandate and you're not getting 50 plus one, right?
Correct.
And if you get 50 plus one, that's a mandate.
Correct.
Okay, but yet this Proposition D doesn't allow for that system to really work as concrete as it's suggested, because if two people run in the primary, it can flip in the general. So you don't really get the outcome that you're looking for. And it's a disservice to somebody who really may be more qualified, but only based on popularity, it got flipped. And that's not that's a disservice to our constituency, this new Proposition D could easily turn out to be a popularity contest than about, you know, somebody who can best represent our constituents. And that's just my concern. And I just want to point that one little piece out, that little flip that could happen. And it happens because of voter manipulation. Because we get a second bite at the apple, and I realize that, oh my God, just who I thought would win, you know, didn't win. And so now I'm going to really gin up my base to make sure they come out so that I can flip the script. So I just want to kind of point that out. Thank you, Alderwoman from the 15th Ward.
You're welcome.
Mr. President, and I thank all my colleagues for indulging me. I know I just ran on, but I just really want to make sure that I pointed out, you know, in my mind, what looked like some inconsistencies in what seems to be a good idea that could potentially have, you know, undesirable consequences. So with that, Mr. President, thank you so much for my time.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not so much interested in debating the merits of Prop D. I myself am still researching the issue. And obviously my colleagues here are split. There are strong opinions on both sides. So I can't support this resolution because it will not represent the opinion of this board. I have a problem with us using this resolution system, this format, to try and educate the voters when we ourselves are in a lot of different positions here. I think the reason why we pass resolutions like this is because we have general consensus and we want to help educate our constituents and let them know, similar to the Clean Missouri Initiative, something that we all can get behind, and we want to make sure that the voters are clear. But right now we are just muddying the waters. And if we pass this resolution when we're clearly split, I don't think that that helps in any way, shape, or form. I respect the resolution process, and I respect every individual member of this board to go out and endorse, you know, this proposition or any other one. Everyone on this board has the right to go out and promote their position, tell their constituents what they think, make public endorsements. But to do it on behalf of this board when so many people really range in their opinions, I think is just wrong. And it's a disservice to our voters. And based on the fact that we're going on 2 hours of debating this, says to me that maybe there's still a lot to talk about. And so I move that we refer this back to committee.
Second.
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 It's been moved by the Alderwoman
Second.
from the 28th and seconded by the Alderwoman from the 20th that we refer resolution 61 back to committee. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll keep this brief because I agree that, you know, it's pretty clear to me that we don't have any unanimous decision on what's happening here. I agree with a lot of what the Alderman from the 9th said, and to the Alderman from the 22nd, I can't think of a better definition for what an election is other than a popularity contest, essentially. And so if people flip their votes in between a primary and a general, that's what they're going to do. I know that my constituency is very split on this. I know we're on the western part of the city here, but we're definitely not outsiders. We're a part of this city just the same as anyone else. And this resolution feels to me the opposite of what I was sent to City Hall to do. They sent me to City Hall to represent their views, not for me to talk to you guys and then tell them how to feel about things. So, you know, this doesn't speak for the whole Board of Aldermen because it definitely doesn't speak for the 24th Ward. And I agree with the Alderwoman from the 28th that we definitely need some more discussion on this before we have anything that says that there's any kind of unanimous consent on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman from the 23rd.
hang on. Actually, I had my hand up from before, but let's do a roll call vote and let's move on. I'm all for that. And I think what'll happen is it probably won't get referred back to committee. Then we can do another vote and end this meeting sometime today.
All right, Alderman from the 16th.
Mr. President, I was going to inquire of some previous speakers regarding the resolution discussion, not necessarily the motion that's before us. So I'm happy to wait till after the motion that's before us is voted on.
Okay. Alderman from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The only thing I'm asking, I keep hearing you all's views, but the only thing I asked is, and I did sit in on that committee hearing when Alderwoman Tyus had those speakers. And so I guess my concern is, and I keep saying this, we need to educate and empower our community to make their own decisions. And I just don't think that people have a right to say how people should feel. So I support voting no on this Prop D, because I have extensively, we have a vote in private committee, so we have brought, as Alderwoman Tyus has told us, I've brought pros and cons in for people to hear both sides of it. And so it was real interesting because we have two young people that sit on that committee. And when they got through hearing the pros and cons, they came back and said, we're voting no on this. So I think it was rushed. I think it was disrespectful. People, our voters are not people where you just throw things at them. So I too support voting no on this.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the 19th.
Mr. President, everything has been said. Most especially, I really appreciate the lesson from the Alderwoman of the First Ward. But what I take insult is when someone says why they were sent here, and we don't make decisions for people and go back and tell them what to do. Don't disrespect me and the hard work that I do and the relationships that I have with my constituency. I make sure I'm at every neighborhood meeting. I make sure I answer every email. I answer phone calls. I stop and talk to people on the street. And so know that we do communicate with our residents. Don't make those kinds of assumptions about how we work with our constituency. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I oppose the motion to send this back to committee. I was very patient with people who had an opposition to it. And see, this is the kind of thing that makes people not be patient. This is what I want you to understand, all of you all who I said spent hours and hours, and then we dismissed and took a break and then came back. The committee is not going to change their vote. So there is nothing else to go back. More to the point, people are, you don't understand different kinds of resolution. This is not a courtesy resolution where everybody feels good. This is a resolution. And we went through the proper procedures, because for those of you who do not know, I am a rules person. And so the rules say we have a hearing, and then we voted out with a pass or do not pass recommendation, which we voted out with a do pass recommendation to the full board. And we had all the people, you had full opportunity to change anybody's mind, which you did not, okay? So to now come and say, how dare you take a position, this is exactly how resolutions are supposed to be done, okay? So even though you don't like the outcome, it's often I don't like the outcome. And guess what? I sign every board bill with my little signature on it, whether I supported it or not. What we have the opportunity to do is vote it up or down. You can vote for it. When you're saying we don't like the full Board of Aldermen's name on it, that's why we have sponsors. Those are the people who are saying that we support it and the votes, okay? So there are already 15 sponsors, so we already have the votes. It's not going to be sent back to committee. So let's move on with this thing and let's not waste a lot of time. I was going to come back and speak to the fact that some things that people said, but at this point, I just want to say I am opposed to having another hearing about this. So let's move on.
Right. And just as a point of clarification, a resolution represents the view, a position of the majority of the members of
Correct.
the Board of Aldermen. That's what a resolution does. And this is not the first resolution by a long shot that is divided. Most resolutions that come before this board are divided. I just want everybody to have that point of clarification because we do have some new members on the board that this is what a resolution is. And if you get a majority of the members of the Board of Aldermen, that represents the board. Right, so it represents the majority, the views of a majority of the members of the Board of Aldermen.
Just like a board bill would do. Thank you.
Exactly right. So it's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 28th and seconded by the Alderwoman from the 20th that we refer resolution number 61 back to committee. A vote of aye would send resolution 61 back to committee, and a vote of no would allow us to continue and just vote this out today. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
No.
Alderman Bosley.
No.
Alderwoman Evans.
No.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
No.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
No.
Alderman Coder.
No.
Alderwoman Rice.
No.
Alderman Gunther.
No.
Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Grass.
No.
Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard.
No.
Alderwoman Green.
No.
Alderman Oldenburg.
No.
Alderman Rhodey.
No.
Alderman Todd.
No, sorry about that.
Alderwoman Davis.
No.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Present.
Alderman Muhammad.
No.
Alderman Boyd.
No.
Alderman Vaccaro.
No.
Alderman Narayan.
Present.
I'm sorry, Alderman Narayan.
Present.
Thank you. Alderman Cone.
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
No.
Alderwoman Boyd.
No.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
President Reed.
No.
Alderman Vollmer.
No.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderman Todd.
No.
One aye vote, 24 no votes, and 2 present.
I vote you fail to sustain the motion of the Alderwoman from the 28th and the 20th. Now we're back to the original resolution. And I think we were on Alderman from the 16th.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, thank you. Would the Alderwoman from the 15th please yield for some questions?
Alderman from the 15th will yield the question to the Alderman from the 16th.
Sure.
Alderman from the 16th, please proceed.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I'm going to ask you to bear with me here because I'm going to stretch your memory and mine to the extent possible here. Do you recall, this would have been April 2017. I only recall it critically because it was right after I was elected as an alderman, newly fresh and green. And I was reaching out to current members of the board to have discussions in general about policy, about the board, and how I could become better and a good alderman. You recall that we met, was at Park Avenue Coffee?
Yeah, I do remember we met.
Do you recall, I mean, we talked about a lot, but do you recall we specifically brought up the discussion around partisan elections? And do you remember, I remember it because it was profound. So you should feel, this is a compliment. You said to me, I brought up sort of the nature of partisan elections. I think we were kind of talking a little bit precisely about what's in the contents of Proposition D. And do you remember what you said to me about local partisan elections, particularly here in St. Louis?
I do not.
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't expect you to, honestly.
Sorry.
I was rather insignificant and still am, so I don't expect you to recall a conversation with me. But I do remember, and you said to me that you are against nonpartisan local elections because it is a place to build party, and the Democratic Party needs to build strong. And St. Louis and Kansas City and Columbia, those are the islands for the Democratic Party to build party in Missouri that is, a supermajority Republican.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a curious guy. It's just in my nature to understand why people have evolved in their decisions, and maybe what has changed your mind from that statement, if you stand behind it and remember saying it, to what we're talking about today, vis-a-vis Proposition D.
I mean, I don't remember that specific conversation, but I do think that I have personally evolved on this issue. And I think a lot of it is, I was raised one of those people in like a Democratic household, and you just kind of always voted for Democrats, and that's just what you did. Like, it was a union household. That was just how I was raised. And but I think that as I've gotten older and saw, like, for example, in New York, they have a fusion voting system where there's the Working Families Party that is basically like the more left wing of the Democratic Party that has been building power. And I think we've seen over the last few years, certainly since 2016, the growth of certain, I guess, or segments within our political parties, and that do have divisions, I think, based upon certain ideologies and commitment to certain issues, whether it's like Medicare for all or something like that. And so for me, that evolution was very much about, I think, taking us to a nonpartisan system encourages us to run on ideas and really articulate what it means, if we do have the backing of our ward org still, and because those endorsement processes can still happen, that we're articulating what it means to be a Democrat, what it means to be a Working Families Democrat, or what it means to, whichever one of these segments, we kind of want to put ourselves in, but it encourages us to run on ideas, is what I think.
Got it. So building a strong Democratic Party is kind of no longer a priority.
What I think I've also come to see is I don't think that places like Kansas City or Chicago have weaker Democratic parties from having nonpartisan elections. And I think at the time of our conversation, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Got it. No, that's great. I appreciate all the questions. I guess it's fair to say you would agree with maybe Rudolph Giuliani's statement about elections, where he said there's not a Republican or a Democratic way to pick up the trash.
Probably, yes.
Yeah. All right, cool. No further questions. Thank you, Alderwoman. I appreciate it.
Anything further, Alderman from the 16th? All right, Alderman from the 23rd, you passed on your opportunity to speak. You said you wanted.
Yeah, I would.
So
at this point, I would like to call the question. I do have something coming up, but I would like to call the question.
All right, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd that we call the question.
Second.
It's seconded by the Alderwoman from the 14th that we call the question. It's a non-debatable motion. So a vote of aye on calling the question will take us directly to the vote for resolution 61. A vote on no to call the question will continue debate. Again, a vote of aye will take us directly to the vote for resolution 61. A vote of no will continue the debate. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
I never vote for calling the question. This is painful. No.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
No.
Alderman Coder.
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice.
No.
Alderman Gunther.
No.
Alderman Balmer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Grass. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Green.
No.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Rhodey.
Aye.
Alderman Todd.
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis.
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
No.
Alderman Cone.
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Grass.
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy. (20) aye votes and 7 no votes.
By a vote, you have sustained the motion on the Alderman from the 23rd and effectively called the question. Now what's before us is the vote for resolution 61, which was moved by the Alderman from the 21st and seconded by the Alderman from the 23rd. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
No.
Alderman Coder.
No.
Alderwoman Rice.
No.
Alderman Gunther.
No.
Alderman Balmer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Grass.
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Green,
No.
Alderman Odenberg,
Aye.
Alderman Rhodey,
Rhodey is aye.
Alderman Todd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Present.
Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Narayan,
No.
Alderman Cone,
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro,
No.
President Reed,
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin, Alderwoman Murphy, Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye, aye, I had said aye. Aye, in case I'm muted again.
No, we got you. We got you.
18 aye votes, 8 no votes, and 1 present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion, Alderman from the 21st, and adopted Resolution 61.
That is the extent of second reading of resolutions.
Miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Wednesday, November the 4th, 2020, Rules will have a meeting at 10 a.m. via webinar. Thursday, November 5th, Public Safety will have a meeting 10 a.m. via webinar. Friday, November 6th, Full Board meeting 10 a.m. via webinar. That is the extent of the announcements.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to take a moment to apologize to the Alderwoman from the 19th for any perceived disrespect. None was intended. I was only trying to talk about my constituency. I wasn't trying to talk about anyone else's work. To the extent that I said or did anything that is disrespectful, I definitely apologize.
Oh, thank you. That was.
Thank you.
That was nice, Alderman. Thank you. Alderwoman from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I just wanted to wish my son a happy 17th birthday today.
Oh, wow. Happy birthday.
Wow. And now I can get off. I'll take him out to lunch. This is my one and only. Make sure this time I'll be an empty nester. He's a senior at Cardinal Ritter College Prep this year. So happy birthday, Amanda.
Happy birthday. And you have the coolest mother on the planet. She actually rides a motorcycle. She's cool.
You're not old enough to have a 17-year-old. I really am.
Happy birthday, nephew. Happy birthday.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Alderwoman from the 14th.
I would just like to remind people that Tuesday, November 3rd is Election Day. Get out and vote, exercise your right as a citizen if you haven't already. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Alderwoman, for that. That's an important announcement. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Going once, going twice. Alderman from the 22nd, you're recognized on the motion to excuse.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. I didn't get a chance to put my hand up soon enough. I just want to keep everybody is safe, on Halloween, all the kids trick-or-treating, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, very safe, Alderman.
Mr. President, before you move on, if I may.
Alderman from the 21st. There's a really important announcement from the Alderman from the 21st. If I think you're gonna announce what I think you're gonna announce, please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tomorrow we will be celebrating the birthday of the former Alderman from the 4th Ward, the Honorable Elder Dr. Samuel L. Moore Jr., who will be 21 years old tomorrow. So I want to make sure that we remember him.
He'd appreciate that. All right, Alderman from the 22nd, the floor is yours again. Majority Floor Leader, do what you do.
Mr. President, I believe all members are present.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well, you're recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move to adjourn until next Friday, November the 6th, 2020, 10 a.m. via webinar.
Excellent. Been moved by the Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by, I think, the Alderman from the 25th.
Yes.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned. You all have a safe weekend and enjoy your trick-or-treating.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.